back.
We're not going to talk about implementing goals tonight. We're just going to set out what they are, and then each one will be addressed based upon our priorities and how to implement.
Mr. Summers, would you like to report out from our closed session?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council met in closed session to consider item number 1 regarding public employee performance evaluation of the city manager, provided direction to staff, council, and the city manager, but took no reportable action. And the second item regarding public employee performance evaluation for the city attorney and a continued discussion of performance evaluation of the city manager will be set for a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Summers. So that will be the closing of our closed session. And now we will convene in our open session for the evening. So, formulaic. Mr. Montgomery, roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Gilman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Lang.
Here.
Councilmember Rule.
Here.
Councilmember Whitman.
Here.
Councilmember Mang.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Montgomery, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes, Mayor. Everyone, welcome. Please rise as you are able. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wonderful. Can I have an approval of the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And now what I have next is a presentation from the Ventura County Farm Workers Housing Study. Yay. Hello.
Good evening. If I could get the presentation up, that would be great. Good evening. My name is Lucas Seibert. I am the Community Development Director for the City of Ojai. And the item you have before you tonight is an informational item, a presentation, kind of an update in terms of what's been going on. This is the Ventura County Farm Workers Housing Study. This is really kind of boiling down phases 2 and 3, a part of a 5-phase program. Next slide, please. Now, you might be wondering what the purpose of this is. And really, it's to conduct a study, obviously, to identify need, develop solutions, and then results seen as a roadmap for the county, countywide, as well as all cities in Ventura County. Now, the last time the study was done in 2002, so it's certainly well in need. And on top of that, it was a part of the housing element for Ventura County-wide, as a part of their programs in 2021. Next slide, please. From a processing standpoint, as I said before, this is a part of a 5-phase program. The first phase was really kind of establishing the formation of an advisory council, which consisted of 40 members. They spanned across both private and public enterprises. And then what has been done? Well, it's a multi-phase study. This is really results of phase 2 and 3 with countywide collaboration, including stakeholder interviews, surveys, focus groups, and then from that is derived the next steps. And that is really the phase 4 and 5, 4 talking about action plan, 5 talking about the implementation. Next slide, please. Here you can see the funding sources. There's 4 included, but really kind of it's a broad stroke. We're mentioned as a part of one of the 10 cities that are identified there. I just want to note that our contribution was a part of a housing trust fund contribution in the 2021, 2022 era at the tune of $50,000. Now, obviously, not all $50,000 was used as a part of this. It's really kind of a portion spread out equally amongst the different cities. Next slide, please. Moving on here, the stakeholder interviews. Next slide, that was done in the winter of 2022, 2023. It was conducted with 11 different interviews. The key issues identified were 3 unfold: housing shortage, affordability crisis, and labor retention concerns. Obviously, we all understand the housing shortage that's been happening throughout the county. It's no different spanning along the farm worker housing component, and then the affordability crisis. The shortage also equals low wages that then equate to a difficulty in terms of individuals finding affordable housing. And then the labor retention is a result of the lack of housing and the affordability piece in terms of keeping people employed here locally. Next slide, please. The agricultural employer survey, the results from that were derived through March through August of 2023. Next slide, please. The employer survey results showed through the interviews and surveys of 40 agricultural employees or employers, which is our broader stroke. There was a high percentage of growing labor needs, that is within the 94th percentile, a high percentage of insufficient farm worker housing, as I mentioned before, and broken down kind of a little bit further. And then most frequently cited reason for not providing employee housing is not wanting to manage housing. That was through the survey itself. Now on the right-hand side, you can see kind of the breakdown of the agriculture that exists throughout Ventura County. Obviously citrus being the highest, avocado falling in second, and then berries, which is really raspberries, blueberries, strawberries. Next slide, please. So a farm worker survey that took place between April and October of 2023. Next slide, please. The farm worker survey result was derived throughout the county. 417 farm workers were surveyed. A sole source of their income. Interesting to note that 97% of those workers see the agricultural business as their sole source of income versus it having, as those individuals having multiple jobs, their sole source is agriculture. Multiple households living within a house itself, a fairly high percentage of that is in terms of what you're seeing here. And then that is derived through a low income derived median performance. In between, you can see here in the 1, 2, 3, 4 down, 22 to 25K for the median personal income, and then household income is a little bit higher, up to almost 40,000. So the interesting piece of that to take away is 48% of the median household income is spent on housing, which is significantly higher than what you typically see through. I think we've seen this before in terms of the data through HCD. They talk about 30%. This is more in the 48, almost 50%. So half of your income is being used for housing. Next slide, please. So farm worker focus group meeting. That was a single meeting that took place in October of 2023 as well. Next slide, please. With that, there were 34 participants spanning 5 different languages. The most prominent language obviously being Spanish speaking. A third of those individuals that were participants were experiencing shared housing, which is that percentage I had showed in the previous slides. So there's a consistent piece that continues to happen with the shared housing. And then housing affordability, the main concern obviously being the housing affordability, space that exists there, distance to schools, lack of awareness of available support services. Interesting little piece that was grabbed out of that was what makes a community: sports, faith-based organizations, and then school accessible amenities, which I thought was interesting considering what makes a community, not parks or something along those lines, but in fact, sports. But I think sports then probably translates to the park aspect to a certain degree. Next slide, please. So with that, with all these surveys, focus groups that had taken place, and the sole source meeting that had taken place, there were areas of agreement. Next slide, please. With that, you're seeing a housing crisis, and H2A workers, or which is what's referred to as an increased reliance on H2A workers due to domestic labor shortages. Before you sit and spin your wheels in terms of H2A workers are. H2 workers are foreign nationals who temporarily work under a temporary visa program to fulfill temporary shortages of domestic labor force. In this case, ag. It's looking to fill that void through agriculture. Housing conditions was also another area that was kind of an agreement. And there's a shortage of inadequate housing, often due to affordability challenges. Now, transportation and lack of knowledge rounds up kind of the agreement pieces. Next slide, please. So next steps. As I had said before in the beginning here, this is a 5-phase approach, multi-year, started in 2021, looking to wrap up in 2025. Phase 4 is the action plan, which is ongoing as we speak into the fall of this year. Anticipated could potentially be spread out even further. Phase 5 being the implementation into the fall of this year and then beyond. If you're wanting more information, I am not the expert on this. I'm simply the sounding board. There are updates that are constantly being provided on the landing page for the farm worker housing study. You can see that. That's the first link. Okay. The second link is a link that I clicked on kind of out of curiosity. If you're interested in getting involved and being a part of this, you can enter your information and spit out the information and concerns or information you're wanting, and they'll certainly reach out to you separately. So with that, I think the last slide is some pictures. Last slide, please. So if you have any questions, I can certainly attempt to answer them. However, I think your best research is Ventura County's website.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. The Cabrillo project, I have sort of a memory that was a farm worker housing.
One piece of it
Project?
is,
A
yes.
portion. Yeah.
Yes.
Portion of it is.
Yeah.
It's 100% affordable. A portion of it is being allocated to farm worker housing, yes.
Okay. And
That's a part of their package for the grants that they're going for.
And is that part of the county program that you're describing, or?
So this
Survey.
is the study to help inform future projects countywide, including projects within our city. But we already have a housing element that dictates and provides programs for the future within our 6 cycle.
Other than the Cabrillo project, are there any others, farm worker projects?
That are proposed within the city of Ojai?
Yeah.
That would be
or
the first.
valley?
That I'm aware of, yes.
Just to offer, the museum had 3 wonderful talks not too long ago from labor suppliers, farmers, all over the map, like organic, all the way to our commercial ones. And it'd be interesting. I'm going to look at those links and see how much does Ojai map to the larger county. But I think we're all very interested in this demographic and what we can do about that. Yeah. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Anything else, Mr. Whitman?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any commissioners here for commission reports? Okay, then I will move on to public communications, and I'm going to start with Chief Barry Parker.
Good evening, Council.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to be here in front of you this evening, and it's an honor. This will be one of my last meetings due to a promotion, which is a happy thing. But I just want to take a moment to reflect on the past 3 years here, public service and the importance of it in our roles that we play. Obviously, Ojai is a very tight-knit community. There's people behind me that I know them by their first names. And I think that is so important that we stay connected to the community. It is so important that we make good decisions, whatever they are. We take our time. There's not a rush on a lot of these things. But more importantly is that we are a safety community and that we are preparing ourselves. We all lived through the Thomas fire, and for some that weren't here, it was tremendous. And just last month in Los Angeles, we saw the devastation. So preparedness, that's one thing, one high note that I want to pass on to my counterpart. His name is Division Chief Nick Cleary. I'm going to have him step up and say a few words.
Hey, good evening. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really looking forward to this. So Nick Cleary, I've been with the fire district since 2002. I'll be stepping into this role effective on Sunday, the 2nd. So right now, Battalion Chief will be a Division Chief, filling in behind Chief Parker. And I'm excited. I lived in Ojai at one time. I have family that lived in Ojai. I worked in Ojai as a fire captain. So I'm looking forward to representing the fire chief and the city of Ojai and building new relationships with you guys. So thank you guys for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, water down the wrong pipe. No big deal. Okay, so Nancy Fritz, Renee Roth, and Jeffrey Starkweather. Yes, come up here. Thank you.
Hello. So I'm here about this pedestrian crosswalk right here. It's very dangerous. I came up a couple of months and talked about it, but now I need action because I worry about all the kids. I worry about me crossing it. So when we start at Creekside Village, there's cars coming. This is all that's happening like all at once at 3:15, 3:30 on weekdays and then during other times. But mainly when school gets out, it's a danger zone. So Creekside Village, the cars are coming out. There's vans, plumbers. People have a lot of maintenance there. Doctor's office, nurses are taking breaks, walking around. Shell station has 2 driveways, cars coming in and out both ways. Motorcycles come out. Sometimes there's 20 motorcycles at a time. The trolley car is stopping and pulling over. People are getting on and off. Attitude Adjustment has the FedEx and the UPS trucks coming in and stopping on the street side. Vaughn's has 2 entrances, cars coming both entrances. Vaughn's huge 18-wheelers pulling up at least 4 times a day to unload products. The neighborhood behind Vaughn's, lots of kids, lots of e-bikes. And high school, the kids are walking, e-bikes, riding. Hospital emergencies, ambulance driving to the hospital, and bright afternoon sun. So put those all together, it's just very dangerous. So there's a school zone flashing light 20 feet in front of the crosswalk right here, but nobody seems to slow down for that. And the kids on the e-bikes push the pedestrian button and just go. They don't wait the 30 seconds to look both ways. And there's just too much activity going on at once, and it's just too distracting. People don't know what to do. And all the bike, little post here, the bike lane there, the medium here. People are going, what's going on? And then I don't know if you can put another light in. I'm not for sure because this light, going to Ojai Avenue is so close to it. And so if not, could we get the pedestrian lights like in Santa Barbara where you push the light and it's red and people are supposed to stop? Because the yellow one is not working. And then with the yellow school light coming up 20 yards ahead, they're going, which way do I stop or when do I stop? Let's see. And then 2 pedestrians were killed on the farthest crosswalk. That one. And I think they're spending right now like over $2 million to fix that and make the sidewalks bigger and stuff. So I came before you a couple of months ago, but now we really have to take charge of this problem. And I know we can all complain about the kids in the e-bike, but the laws change or something. So
Okay. We'll take this very seriously.
Thank you. And if someone would like to meet me at 3:15 and watch all the traffic and the kids come out as far as the truck, that would be great.
Thank you. Ma'am, we have to have you end so we can get to the next comment. But no, are you willing to leave that?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fritz. Renee Roth and then Jeffrey Starkweather.
Good evening, Council. My name is Renee Roth, and I remember being up at this podium here talking about this same intersection after one of my neighbors, Edith, was hidden at the second intersection on that sign in front of the Chase Bank. She was in a walker. She was crossing the crosswalk. She got hit by a car who didn't see her coming because of the sunlight. I've experienced the same glare and not seen people at those intersections as well. I live off that street. I'm on that street every day. I know exactly what she's talking about. It's very difficult. In fact, there was a lawsuit that had to be settled as a result of that. I will say no more. I just want you to know this is really serious, and I know you all know this is important, and that's not why I came here. Chief Parker, thank you very much for your service to our community. I want to acknowledge what you have done, and I appreciate your service, and I was here for the Thomas Fire, and I will never forget it. And fortunately, we did survive, and we've learned a lot of lessons, and I'll talk about that later. The next thing I wanted to talk about is e-bikes. I wasn't here for the meeting where you passed the motorcycle cop. And Trina, I would like to know, and I would like the members of the council to know what is happening in Santa Barbara tonight. Santa Barbara is having a conversation. Oh, great. Okay, and Kim, I guess, has printed it out. I sent it to Kim and Rachel because I know they voted no for the motorcycle cop. If I were here, I would have voted no for it because I think we need to do both motorcycle cop and education and definitions of what is reckless use of an e-bike, and that's what Santa Barbara is doing right now, today. They had their meeting. I didn't attend, but they are defining what is reckless use, what are motor vehicles, motorized e-bikes, and all the motorized things you can use, and they have an impoundment section where they can impound it, but there's one concerning comment in their report, which is, it says motorcycle or officers are not allowed to talk to minors one-on-one. I did not know that was a limitation on what officers are able to do one-on-one with minors. There has to be somebody else there. How is that going to work? I think we're going to have some issues, and I think it needs to be addressed. We need to do both motorcycle safety and education and look at what other cities.
Thank you, Ms. Roth. Jeffrey Starkweather.
Good evening, City Council, staff, Chief of Police, citizens. First of all, I want to congratulate our mayor for a wonderful, town hall last night. I've been recovering from an operation, so sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night. And last night I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It took me about 45 minutes to go back to sleep, a couple of melatonins, but I started thinking about all the questions that I grew out of that. So I want to follow up on that. But I learned something last night that the community should have known a year and 2 months ago. Why we have permanent supportive housing rather than the model that Dignity Moves came here originally with, which was transition housing. And I met them, went down and visited their transition, looked at, and I was totally sold on that model. And so I was frustrated. And they made it clear why. Because we have no permanent supportive housing in Ojai. And we are like the only place that got such a large amount of money because we have to do permanent supportive housing. I think they confirmed everything I know about housing problems and the homeless. This is only going to hit a portion of our homeless problem. We're not even addressing kids. I asked Atticus, sitting next to him, Atticus Reyes, and he goes, oh yeah, we got a ton of kids that are living in cars and so forth. So I think this is a big issue we have to address. So I won't go into it because I've made spiels about affordable housing so many times before. You're probably tired of them. But I do have a couple of takeaways from this thing. Number one, we need a housing committee, task force, something that's going to work on not just the homeless, which it does need to, but the larger issue and come up with strategies. One of the things that group could do, or someone else needs to do, is something we've committed on in our housing element, which is to review and revise and reform our housing regulations, our zoning code, because we have plenty of barriers. When I was on the planning commission, I kept talking about this. The third that Jane Walter said is, besides additional housing, the only other thing we can really do to treat this problem in the long run is rent subsidy. We have committed in our housing element to support help of Ojai with rent subsidy. We've never done it. And the final thing, which I've got about 6 seconds to say, is that I have a lot of questions, which I will
Finish your sentence.
I would like, I'm going to send them to the whole panel. I would like the city, through the manager, to put some kind of portal on the website that would answer people's questions. Because I think when you start thinking about all you heard, questions start arising. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Starkweather. Do I have one more card over there?
One more card, Mayor, from Starchild.
Mr. Starchild.
Thank you. If there's a theme for today's council meeting, it's focusing on our agenda on what's most important to the people of Ojai. One thing that I think is not important is strife, is conflict, lawfare. It can detract from our city's ability to address the needs of the city and its residents. When is it that we will reschedule the closed session meeting to talk about the city entering the Byrne v. Rule lawsuit? When is it that we'll talk about waiving privilege on some of those closed session meetings so that people can know the truth of what happened? Also, I think that's very important is we need to reconsider the policy that's in effect now that 2 council members can call a special session. I think the effect of this policy is that many distracting items that don't have the council majority's support can be agendized and can distract our city further. Thank you.
Thank you, Starchild. Mr. Montgomery, anybody online?
Mayor, we have no raised hands on Zoom, but let's take a moment and speaking to our Zoom participants. Now is the time to raise your hand for general public comment on our agenda tonight. We'll give you a last call. Still no raised hands. And Mayor, we'll move on.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Moving on to the consent calendar. Is there anyone on the council that wants to remove anything from the consent calendar before we approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you.
Second.
Any discussion?
I'm going to approve the consent calendar. I would pull the warrants and discuss once again the legal fees, but I do want to move forward with the agenda, so I will not do that, but I will point out to anyone who wants to look at it that it's worth looking at.
Thank you, Ms. Rule. Mr. Montgomery, roll call, please.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Meng.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Gilman.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And we'll move on to discussion item 2, city council goals.
Great.
Mr. Harvey, and I want to ask you, Mr. Harvey, when's the right time in your presentation to accept public comments for this?
Well, I would ask, I mean, you are the presiding officer and your colleagues.
No, I understood, but what for your flow? Let us know what you need
okay.
here.
If it so pleases the council, I would like to make my presentation. I would like to take council questions about the agenda report and or the presentation, go to public comment, and then come back for a council discussion.
Thank you.
If that's okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, great. So thank you very much. I'm impressed that we're already here at this item. That's awesome. And the presentation is up. So next slide, please. We know why we're here, for the city council goals. Okay, going to cover some items, and a lot of this may seem obvious, but I just want to make sure we're all understanding what we're doing and why we're doing and how we're going to do this tonight. So the goals, what the heck are they? Well, this is how we as a council and a municipal organization focus our efforts, our attention, and our resources. The goals that you establish are going to be in place so long as you sit together as a city council. So that means until November of 2026. Okay, and that's important. Keep that in mind. These are not goals for here forward eternal. These are your goals for while you are a council together. And that's important because this is how you set the direction, which then translates or trickles down rather into your budget and into the things that we do. That's why they're important. With goals, we're able to facilitate results. That's how we do it. Everybody knows what we're doing and why and how we're going to get there. These are, for another term you could use, these are your priorities. And I bring that up because you're going to only want to have a small number of priorities. This doesn't mean that we're not doing other day-to-day work, just because, let's just play pretend. Let's say if you don't come up with a goal for recreation, and I'm not saying that you're not going to, but if you don't, that doesn't mean that we're not doing recreation, or that we're getting rid of that department, or that we don't care about that. No, it does not mean that at all. It just means that for this time period that we are working on these goals, maybe it's not in and amongst our highest priority, okay? It also doesn't mean that, the day-to-day, and the state mandates or the federal mandates are not being accomplished either. So it's just, you're deciding what your top priorities are for that time period. With that in mind, it's really important that we develop what I'm calling SMART goals. Goals that are strategic, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive, okay? So we're not necessarily swinging for the fences. Yes, it's great to be aspirational, but we want to have things that we can achieve during that period. Doesn't really help us if we establish a goal with tactics that we can't realize. Unless there's a decision by this council that they want to, go to multi-year goals, which I don't recommend because it's most effective when you keep the goals with the governing body that was elected. Some terms I'm going to use tonight. So again, goals are going to be an area of focus, and with the goals, there are tactics that then roll up to the goal. So the goal is, what we're doing, and the tactics are how we're going to achieve that. How are you going to implement this goal of fire hardening or emergency preparedness or housing or whatever it is? Okay, moving on. Next slide. How's this going to work? So we're going to start the process tonight. We are not going to finish tonight, okay? We are going to, I'm asking you to indulge me. What I would like to do is I would like to go through each council member individually and have each member list what they would like to be, the goals if they were king or queen. And once we have that, and the chief deputy city clerk will be helping me here, we will then see where there are some concentric circles. And I fully anticipate that there will be overlap in your list. Why do I anticipate this? I meet with you on a regular basis. I talk to you. I know the areas that are important to you. And so it's no surprise, and we're going to get to the survey and the results, that some of the items that I put in the survey are things that I've heard you talk about. Okay, so I'm expecting to come up with some overlap. Assuming we have that overlap, and let's say it's 4 or 5 goals. That's okay. We don't need to have 10, or some huge number. Let's say there's 4 or 5. What I would like to then do is to, agree that, okay, this is our starting list. It doesn't mean it's our final list. Let's identify some tactics that go with each goal. Okay, let's get those in place. Once we have that, I'm going to ask that you kick it back to staff. We take a look at the tactics and the goals. We offer some suggestions. Maybe we add some tactics. Maybe we remove some tactics because there's a problem or a concern. And we bring it back to you to continue the discussion. That discussion would be at a near-term meeting, probably sometime in March or April. And at that meeting, I would want to finalize the list, come up with a list, a specific number of goals with tactics. I'm going to recommend somewhere between 5 and 10. I've worked with cities that have had far more numbers, and it's just not achievable. Once we have an adopted set of goals and tactics, and no, we're not there. Okay, good. Once we have an adopted list of goals and tactics, from that we will develop a work plan. And this will be just exactly kind of what you think. It's going to have the goal, the tactic, some granularity as to, what the status is, what the estimated timeline is, and who the department is that is in charge of realizing that goal. And we're going to bring this work plan and an overall status to you back quarterly so that the council and the community knows how we're doing. It's our scorecard. And no surprise, at the end of our time together as a council and staff, I want to get an A on the report card, okay? I want us to move through and achieve the goals because that's how we deliver results to the community, okay? Okay, next slide. We put out a community survey. Admittedly, this was a non-scientific survey. Some people may have submitted entries more than once. All the survey was meant to do was to provide you with a snapshot of potential public input on this topic. It's not the be-all, end-all. There could have been categories that we left out. There could have been things we missed, but at least you have some type of idea as to how the community feels about some of the goals that you might be considering tonight. And again, I base this list upon what I've heard you all individually talk about, and also, past council goals and things that I know that are important to the community. Next slide. So, you're going to see this in the agenda report. The results of the survey show, emergency preparedness number 1, fire hardening number 2, city infrastructure maintenance 3, affordable and workforce housing 4, fiscal sustainability 5, public safety 6. Next slide. Climate and environment 7, homelessness 8, economic development 9, recreation classes and programs 10, and rounding out the list, technology and innovation at 11. This is not exhaustive. If there's something that we didn't cover that you would like to have, great. If this is too long, great. But this at least is a starting point so maybe this is where we can begin. Next slide. So again, going back to tonight, thank you, Mr. Montgomery. He is going to be displaying his screen as we go through so that we see what your respective lists are. I've asked him to highlight those that are across the board so that we can see where the concentric circles lie. In the end, goals and tactics work like everything else with the council. It'd be great if things were unanimous, but it may just be that 3 people think that's what we should be doing. That's how everything is that we do. So maybe we have some goals that are 5 people feel that way. Maybe there's some goals that are 3 people that feel that way. I'm going to ask the chief deputy city clerk to highlight those, even if there's only 3 people that have agreed upon it, because that's what we do as a council. And so again, once we get past, what are the concentric circles and we move into the tactics, if 3 people want a tactic, we're going to move forward with it. If only 2 people want it, we're not going to move forward with it because just like everything else we do, it requires a vote of the majority. Again, so I'm hoping that we come up tonight when we're finished with a preliminary list with the corresponding tactics, and you direct me to bring it back to staff. We work on it, and then we bring it back to you for further revision and adoption. And I think, next slide, please. Okay, I think let's go. Yeah, I think I've kind of covered this. Next slide, please. Now we're at the point when you can ask me some questions, and if you don't want to do that, we can go to comment and then come back and get to work. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I have a question. Is that Chief Peak a new graphic for us, or have I just been missing it all this time?
Okay, so yes, and this kind of feeds into my evaluation a little bit. We have, I'm trying out a new style guide, and at a meeting in March, I'm going to be bringing forward to you this proposed style guide. So this is our beta test of potentially what a informal logo may look like. This doesn't take the place of the seal, but we're looking at some new branding and style, and I will also be meeting with you individually to discuss this. Just since you brought it up, this also features colors from your seal. That's why we have teal and yellow and white.
Okay, cool. It's not a question, it's a hoped for vision in the future, and that would be that our agendas going forward, once we have some things nailed down, that we see sort of, what's the strategy? That's almost the first part, and then here's the item that we're discussing that day. So I guess I'm imagining at some point, we're not discussing anything that's not one of those big items unless there's a really good reason to. that's my hope for.
So one thing I've done in other cities, and we could certainly do it here, is within the agenda report template, you have a goal alignment section, and the agenda report correlates to one of the goals. However, I will point out that you end up with many that are just NA, because some things are just operational,
That's fine.
or they're a requirement.
Great.
You know, or sometimes something comes up, and that's also a good thing because your goals and your tactics are living. So sometimes you get halfway through your term and you're like, wow, how did we not have a goal of whatever it is? We
And that's
need
good.
to adopt it. And that might mean dropping a goal, or it might just mean tightening your belt and trying to get more accomplished. Those are both things that happen.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's good.
So I have a question in that. Are we only presenting like programmatic goals that we have, or if we'd just like some data on a topic, can that be? Is that part of?
So tonight I'm going to ask you. Okay, so I think I can answer the question. Tonight I'm just asking you for the big picture areas that you really want to focus on for your priorities. This does not prevent you as council members, as individual members, from coming to me with questions where you need some information or some data. And it doesn't have to align with a goal when you make this request, because sometimes you're trying to understand an issue and you don't know if that should be a goal or not. You just need some more information. I don't think we have a policy on this, but I just want you all to know. I have kind of an informal thing which I call like the hour rule. So if you come to me, pardon the use of your last name, if you come to me, it's true. If you come to me and you say, I need some information on this topic so I can make an informed decision, that's also part of my job and staff's job. So I think it doesn't prevent you from doing that. If something becomes kind of a woolly or bigger thing, then I might say, you know what, council member, you might want to find a buddy, and this should be a future agenda topic, and we can see if there's a desire amongst the council to move forward. So does that answer the question? Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Yes.
I have a question. So this is sort of a tactic that, and my question is, this tactic could roll into any number of goals. So let's just say broadband, which might be a tactic.
Yes.
Well, it certainly would help with emergency preparedness. It's certainly city infrastructure. It could be fiscal sustainability.
I'm going to argue, if I could just step in, because I
Just
share.
how
You and
to
I have a
think
meeting.
about this.
You and I have
Yeah.
a meeting in Simi Valley on Thursday this week.
Yes, we do.
One of the topic areas of focus was technology and innovation.
Right.
And that might be, but to your point, it is up to the council where you want that to live. I would certainly hope that we walk away, either this meeting or the next meeting, with something related to that, because I see broadband as being hugely important, and I see it as something that we can realize in the time period that you're together that could be hugely beneficial to our community.
Yeah, and so I guess my point is that while it would fit most reasonably under technology and innovation, if that doesn't make it in the top 5, I'm just pointing out that there are other ways to not necessarily squeeze it in, but find an appropriate place for it to live due to its value and importance.
So if I could follow up with that, I know that I've had at least 4 of you, probably 5 of you, also talk to me about fireworks and drone shows, and it's a very similar thing, right? You could put that under fire hardening, right? I think I would hope for a tactic where we leave this meeting or the next, where we're pursuing, whether we want to allow fireworks or not, and a drone show. And so I think that's a similar thing. That's because we're going to be, I suspect, just from having discussions with you, that will be something that we'll be working on.
If I can follow up with what you brought up, Ms. Rule, I would suggest something like broadband would fit into many categories, as you say, and that to me is a great tactic because it checks many boxes. So that would be a high priority.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Super. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, one other question is, so we know that some general plan and specific elements of it are coming up. That shouldn't prevent us from saying this is on our priorities list, correct?
The general plan update is underway. You've already given direction on that. We're well into it, and we're going to have elements coming back for your review. If you like, you could certainly make that a priority area, but that kind of, to me, is a good example of stuff that we're already definitely immersed in and working on and following council direction currently. I don't feel that I need council prioritizing it to make it move forward because we have that pre-existing direction. However, this is a great example of what you're here for. You're a policy board. You're identifying what your main priorities are. And if there are things about the general plan update that you would like, to see, then it's entirely appropriate. This is very subjective based upon your role as a governing body member.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, we'll move to public comments then. I have Renee Roth, Bill Miley, and then Chris Danch. Thank you, sir.
I don't like being first.
Oh,
I like being last.
Noted for next time.
Okay. I sent a letter to many of you, and in that letter, I talked about the use of Measure C funds. And I realized that many of you may not have even been in office or paying attention to what Measure C was. So I want to read what Measure C says. And it has to do with a 5% increase on the TOT tax, the transit occupancy tax, and it allows that 5% of funds to be used for, and I'm going to read specifically, to fund city capital improvement and maintenance projects, including street paving and fire mitigation, code enforcement, and climate change mitigation. Now, those can be big words and mean a lot of different things, as I've heard even Mr. Harvey say, mean different things to different people. So I really think it's important when we're moving forward with spending Measure C funds that we try to identify what do those terms mean. My letter was focused on basically home hardening and preparing our community to reduce our risk of a fire spreading in one area of town that will, unknowns to their neighbors, cause a fire in another and another and another. That home hardening concept is not defined in this, but it is covered under fire mitigation. And fire mitigation could include other things. So I want to make it really clear. I do believe Measure C funds should and could be used for that. And the point I wanted to make is we've got the spending power to do it in Measure C. But unfortunately, I think the city has been overly focused on electrification and pushing electrification into the building code, which raises costs for housing and development. It's over-regulating. As we've seen, it's gone back and forth. The court has ruled you can't do this and you can't do that, with no real measurable benefits. And I'd really like you to think about, when you prioritize, what is it that we're going to do and get some results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Roth. Bill Miley, Chris Danch, and then Randy, is it Koger? Anyway, thank you. Koger, thanks.
Hello. To evaluate the choices, it's important to remember that in the chart that was presented, 60% of the survey respondents were either single home occupants or couples without kids. Also, 47% are over the age of 65, including me. That's important. We're the young people, okay? Mm-hmm. So, I put down 18 goals. And I like the Tier 1 and Tier 2 idea, so I'm only going to read the Tier 1. Facilitate at least 150 new affordable family rental and purchase units. Fire hardening of city properties. Consider the use of fire-resistant gel, barricade gel, for immediate fire protection. The Palisades Shopping Center was saved by this application. Adopt residential ordinances to tax vacant homes or encourage their rentals. Provide new public parking facilities to reduce town vehicle travel for parking spots. Use new technology to reduce short-term rentals. That's a 2. Adopt a maximum 25-mile speed limit for city streets. Adopt a council policy to organize and use ad hoc type community groups for problem solving. Establish, publish, and distribute an evacuation plan for the city and valley. Working with the county, show choke points in the roadways. Identify the choke points and work on those to do preventive care to reduce their choke point, whatever. Okay, and a drum roll. Prepare an annual report each year to the Ojai citizens on city accomplishments and how we maintain our city. An annual report to the public. Then I have 2 others. The Ojai art community is a major foundation of the culture in the Ojai Valley. It should be boldly supported by our city. City Art Commission tries to do that. This year, $30,000. Factually, that's an amount of 0.2% of the general fund. I want to suggest the council seriously consider tripling the amount next year to $90,000. And the last goal is consider placing a sales tax on the November ballot. Sales tax increase. We currently pay 7.25. It's been around since 1991. It's basically okay. Costco has 9.25%. They have a parking lot that you can't find any places on if you go buy their own. And if I spend $1,000 a year in Ojai, and tax $10.
Thank you, Mr. Miley. Chris Danch, Randy, I'm just going to go with your first name here, and then Larry Steingold.
Good evening. I'm Christopher Danch. I'm the Executive Director of the Ojai Fire Safe Council. I believe that a large majority of our citizens see wildfire risk as one of our most important concerns in the Valley, and many of those see wildfire as literally an existential threat to our Valley. The Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council agrees with this assessment. Measure C, which I was around for, was passed in no small part on the promise that some of those funds would be used to improve safety from wildfire. While fire hardening, as listed in the goals, is part of wildfire risk mitigation, I recommend you to say that if you adopt this as a goal, the priority should be termed wildfire safety and risk mitigation, as this encompasses a multitude of strategies and means to more holistically address this existential wildfire risk. I'm actually not exactly sure what is meant by fire hardening, but it does seem to be too narrow, and while, especially if it pertains just to structural hardening, which is important, wildfire safety risk and mitigation covers much more, including fuel reduction, vegetation management, watershed functions, resilient landscapes at all levels from the watershed down to the parcel level, home and other structural hardening, defensible space in HIZ, home existing zone, fire-wise communities, critical water infrastructure for first responders, and that's more than just the number and flow of hydrants. Fire-wise, evacuation and shelter in place options. We have an extensive evacuation assessment in place. We know what to do and what we actually is not feasible to do. Community outreach of education on all aspects of wildfire safety and risk mitigation. Business outreach and education, including the hospitality sector. Public emergency communications and messaging. That was a mess during the Thomas Fire. Building codes, regulation, ordinance need to be pay attention to over time. Responding to the insurance crisis, which is complex, nuanced, and multifaceted. Public health, including mental health. Protection of our AFN populations and other vulnerable members of our community. And community engagement, which also builds social cohesion and capital. That is one of the most, if not the most important factor in disaster response and recovery. And emergency operations as it pertains to coordination with CBOs and other private agencies. When we do this, It includes emergency preparedness and climate adaptation. What you do for wildfire in a comprehensive way is going to apply to other disasters as well. And the framework and the infrastructure and the social cohesion created will be there for all those as well, though the details may differ. Now, this may seem all very daunting. But you have wisely adopted a community wildfire protection plan that contains pages of recommended actions that has been thoroughly vetted by a wide variety of participants, and suggest that that's where we start when you adopt this goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dant. Randy, how do you pronounce your last name? Coggin. Thanks. Thank you very much.
You were pretty close.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. As mentioned when I was called up, my name is Randy Coggin. Well, I'm not a resident of the city proper, residing up on Los Encinos Road in the Ojai Valley. I do care very much about the city. It's all the city offers in the way of fine shops, dining, arts, and culture in general that brought us back here this last year to retire. I come before you to urge you to incorporate fire hardening as your top priority, not just for this coming year, but for the coming year in the coming years as well. I recommend this not only because it was pretty much tied with emergency preparedness in your community survey, but because fire hardening and emergency preparedness are inextricably intertwined, with each one supporting the other. I wholeheartedly concur with Chris that the council should consider restating the priority as wildfire safety and risk mitigation, which is not only more holistic, and I won't go into the list that Chris gave you, but better captures those initiatives and actions that the council should consider in ensuring the city's resilience to impacts from encroaching wildland fires. I'm here tonight not only as the newest member of the board member of the Ojai Valley Fire Safe Council, but as a seasoned fire service professional as well, having spent over 25 years in the fire service, most of which as a chief officer, including having been a former fire chief for Ventura County Fire Department. During my fire service career, I saw more than my share of the destructive power of wildland fires and how those fires not only impact unincorporated areas, but how those fires spread and impact surrounding cities as well. The city of Ojai is no different. It is existentially threatened and vulnerable. Not so much from a major wildland fire starting within the city itself, but because of what surrounds it. It would be nice if you could build an actual wildfire-resistant wall to prevent such a threat, but obviously you cannot. What you can do is take the necessary steps to mitigate this risk as much as possible. The city took that first step by its adoption of the Community Wildfire Prevention Plan. You can now take that next step by making fire hardening, aka wildfire safety and risk mitigation, your top priority, along with emergency preparedness. These two together will allow you to build that wildfire resistant wall. Thanks for listening to my remarks and for the opportunity to address you.
Thank you, Mr. Coggin. Larry Steingold and Jeffrey Starkweather.
Larry Steingold. Ben, thank you very much for that presentation. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They also work for jurisdictions. Basic needs: housing, roads, food, water, sanitation, security, safety. Then we start getting down into all the other nice things. But we're all here in Ojai and nowhere else. We have $16 million. We're not Sacramento. We don't have billions. There's nobody sitting on the side writing checks or matching funds. We only have so much money to spend. And roads, fire hardening, Palisades, it's gone. Altadena's gone. Paradise is gone and now decades. I don't want to be gone. I like it here. I want to stay here. I show up here for the same reason that you do, because we like it here. I want it to remain Ojai. I like what it was, but I didn't know what it was because I only can look in history books. But I'd be fighting for what was here too. All right, we have things to do. Do something. We've been talking about traffic now for 8 years that I've been here, and I don't see anything. We've been talking about streetlights on Ojai Avenue and here, and there's nothing on the agenda about streetlights. They talk about speed. There's nothing on the agenda about changing the speed limit. We have committees, we talk about it, we have commissions, we throw things up in the air, and if somebody catches it, great. But we have to do things. I mean, action. I mean, even if you're wrong, at least something is happening. You can undo it. I mean, you talk about goals. I mean, I sent you a list of 10. I mean, speeding. Try something. We can't have a cop everywhere. You can put speed bumps on every street that the people want them and then take them off if they don't want them. But it'll slow traffic. I mean, try stuff. You know, park and rec. Has the casino showed up for a bus? I don't know. But that's something they can do. But I mean, we have a park and rec commission. There's only 8,000 people in town. We can have one second to no one. I mean, we just do it. And the goals, attainable, achievable, things that you can reach. There's always the reach. But let's stick with what we can do and get done and do them. I mean, the word feckless, dithering, you guys are new, two of you are new. But I mean, the past, you know, pickleball should never have happened. I mean, it was noisy. They should never have put it next to housing in the first place. I mean, all it took was, gee, does it disturb people? Yes. Don't do it.
Thank you, Mr. Stengel. Jeffrey Starkweather.
Good evening again.
Hey.
I'm glad we're doing this exercise. Before I get started, I just want to, of course, I've said this so many times, but I do think fire threat and housing are our two most existential crises. I think we need to go a little bit slower in this process than what Ben suggested. I think you all should pick your goals and then have time to reflect and let citizens give input on tactics. Because there's a lot of citizens, like Chris Danch, who may not know a lot more about the tactics than you might. And just to be sitting up here and figuring them out, I mean, I would have a hard time doing it, to be honest with you. If I gave me a couple of days, I could probably do it. But sitting here and so I think we need to make that process and give citizens a chance to involve themselves. Another thing to think about is, to the extent that we can combine goals that are interactive, all the better. And the same thing as Leslie said, Councilman Rule said, tactics that can cut across. And I would say to Mr. Whitman's question about information, I think he's onto something. Because when it comes to housing, if we created a housing task force, one of the biggest things tactics we need to do is get a lot more information about how housing works in the city. So I think that is a legitimate tactic, obviously with climate change too. So I would start with talking about combining goals. I think fire hardening and emergency preparedness are somewhat the same thing in a lot of ways, but they're also climate issues. I think I've sent some of you this article that was a result of scientists who looked at California federal lands are hemorrhaging carbon dioxide. Wildfires are largely to blame. So wildfire suppression in Southern California is a climate tactic. I also had something I've cited before. This is from a research that showed it's no longer a matter of preventing wildfires, but instead preventing points of ignition within communities by employing home hardening strategies, proper landscaping, fire-resistant siding, and enjoining neighborhoods in collective efforts of brush clearing. So I would say those two tactics include affordable housing would also include homelessness, because we know that's the cause of homelessness, and it's also a climate strategy. To the extent we do infill housing and people don't have to commute here, we are cutting down on greenhouse gases. So I would look to
Thank you, Mr. Starkweather. And then Star Chat.
The most pressing issue facing Ojai is affordable housing. We've done some things here in Ojai to make housing more affordable. The Cabin Village is an example of subsidizing housing. The rent stabilization ordinance is one that helps keep people in their apartments or helps them find new housing if their housing is sold. The one thing that we haven't worked much on in Ojai yet, or hasn't come to fruition, is more housing supply. Previously in Ojai, our population was much larger. Previously in Ojai, people could afford to live here with just one person working in the household. They could afford to work just one job, and they could spend time after work with their children, with their families, with their community. It's getting harder and harder to do that for young people. We're overburdened sometimes with our rent, many spending more than 50% of their income on their rent, many unable to buy a house and probably going to rent forever or move out. Maybe some young people you know are considering whether they can live as adults in the city that they grew up in. We can change this in Ojai. The solution is going to be to build more housing. I hear that there's not a ton of space, and I've got some ideas. One idea is to get rid of parking requirements. We have an absurdity here in the parking lot where people are housed where the cars should be parked. We could have more housing for people and less housing for cars. Another is to allow 3-story buildings for residential housing. There are 3-story buildings throughout Ojai. I asked. Just one? Well, there's at least one. And there can be more. When we make more housing, it brings down the price overall, and more people will be able to live here, spending less time on rent and more time, more money in their community. Thank you.
Thank you, Star Child. Mr. Montgomery, anybody online?
Mayor, we have no raised hands, but let's make sure. We just had one raised hand now. Zoom participants, we are on item 2, City Council goals. First, we'll have Stephen Colme. And James Ranger in the back, could you please give me permissions to invite our participants in? Stand by, council. There we go. Stephen, you have the floor.
Thank you. I applaud the council's efforts at goal setting and development of intermediate tactics to achieve underlying community priorities. But I do ask the council members to please disregard the admittedly non-scientific community survey. While I am not a survey researcher, I worked on several projects with Mark Baldessari while we were both on the faculty at UC Irvine. Mark became president and CEO of the Public Policy Institute of California. PPIC is the premier nonpartisan survey research organization in California. Therefore, I know that conducting a valid community survey is not an amateur undertaking. So what did you have presented before you as a survey? There were 159 responses in a community of 7,500 individuals with about 5,000 voters. So this was a 3% self-selected sample of voters as respondents. And I do respect the integrity of our city manager in representing this as non-scientific, but no experienced survey researcher would hazard an interpretation of or reliance on these results. Decision-making still rests with you as the council, and I encourage you to take these survey results with grains of salt and not waste time trying to interpret a meaningless survey. That, however, begs the larger question of how, as a council, you can meaningfully engage public opinion and participation beyond the handful of council groupies that you hear from at nearly every meeting. Let's be honest, this narrow faction does not represent our community, nor does a poorly constructed and self-selected survey. I do wish you the best of luck tonight and encourage you all to use your gut instincts as leaders and as our elected representatives to set the highest priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Colomay.
No more raised hands, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Back to you, Mr. Harvey.
If I may, Mayor and Council, just some clarification based on some of the items that we heard during public comment. I'm going to argue that you are going to have time to sort out tactics, and you don't need to decide everything tonight. It's a preliminary list. If this process takes 2, 3, or more meetings, that's fine. When we come away tonight with a starting list of goals with corresponding tactics, I would expect you to go to your constituents and ask for some fleshing out and some assistance. Remember, your staff will also be doing the same. So when we come back together to revisit this topic, I would expect that we'll be revising some of the things we came up with. That's the idea. It's a starting point tonight. We don't have to be, I'm not wanting or asking you to complete, I'm just asking you to start. So that's one thing. Secondly, I fully expect from talking to you individually and from what you hear from the community that some type of fire-related, I don't want to get into the semantics to use the wrong words here, some type of emergency response related or one or multiple goals will come out of this. I would encourage you to avail yourselves of the expertise present in the room tonight. You have 3 or 4 chiefs here who, some active, some retired, who could be very helpful to you and whom I have asked to be here to assist. So you don't have to come up with all the answers, and you can certainly call on them to help you. I think that's all that I have for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. So we want to go now person by person?
That's what I'd like to do,
Okay.
if that's okay with the council. Okay, so thank you. So you can see we have a list by member, and so Mayor, may I start with you? And if you need us to add beyond 10, of course, that's
Okay,
fine.
great.
And you also don't need to fill that up if you don't want to either.
Okay.
Sorry.
Not in order of priority, housing.
Oh, wait, hang on a second. Mr. Montgomery?
Mayor,
ready?
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
As part of the code of conduct, we've been timing council members by 5 minutes. Should we do that tonight with our council goals?
It's up to the council.
I think that's fine. I'll be done in way less than 5.
Thank you for answering.
I can prioritize. Sure. I was thinking that, are we saying these 10, I thought we were looking for ones, the priority would emerge to say all of us have picked one among our list. Okay. Am I hearing that right? Okay.
So yeah, what I'd like to clarify is it matters less the priority right now. What we're trying to see is where you have overlap.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, while I would love for all 5 of you to agree on one, as long as there's 3, we're going to consider that consensus.
Yep. That's what I heard. Mr. Montgomery, ready to go? Housing. Second, wildfire preparedness, risk reduction, or whatever that we land on. Growing culture for residents. Infrastructure.
Mayor, maybe a little more slowly.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Growing culture for residents. I'm just trying to give the catchphrase. It would be like Parks and Rec, but Art Commission. I want Mr. Miley to think well of us, that we grow the Arts Commission, whatever that means. And then infrastructure improvement. Safety, parenthetically, traffic. Things like that, not disaster preparedness. Oh, safety, and then parenthetically, something like traffic. Diversifying the economy. Climate resilience, environmental stewardship. However we phrase that. and then fiscal sustainability. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I see some overlaps. We're doing good so far. Okay. So my first one is, and to use Mr. Dench's term, wildfire safety, risk, and mitigation. Then environmental preparedness, infrastructure. And within infrastructure, I'm specifically looking at ways that we can. So I have climate mitigation and resilience under a separate topic, but I'm specifically for infrastructure, look at what can we do now to prepare for a warming climate, planting trees, tree canopy, things like that. Then communication. Facilitate better communication with community through social media, through a coordinated communications plan. Fiscal sustainability. I'd like to include with that things like making sure that commercial properties rents aren't going sky high and businesses are having to close. Along with that, I would include broadband as a part of that too, looking at relationships with the chamber. An economic development plan to diversify our economy, adding things in addition to tourism. And then also, I like the way that you phrased the growing culture for residents. We had a number of survey respondents say that they wanted to see more activities for youth. We had a lot of people talking about, or several people here and ones I've talked to too, talking about how we need more arts funding. We're below Simi Valley. And that's like literally what I heard. And Bill, I appreciate your comments to that effect too. And then finally, housing, specifically low income housing, and perhaps looking at a community housing trust.
Mayor Pro Tem, would you, once Mr. Montgomery's finished typing, would you please take a look at what he has prepared and offer edits? Thank you.
Well, I think the number 2 and number 3 are I think infrastructure would be my number 2, and environmental prep would go under. Actually, no, keep those separate. Yeah, but housing and community housing trust, that might be a tactic underneath housing.
And Mr. Montgomery, I think you could don't you need to worry about where the concentric circles are yet. Let's just first focus on each member getting the list down, making sure it's what they want it to be, and then we'll take a moment because some of the terms will be slightly different by member, and we're going to want to make sure of that before we decide that that's concentric circle or not.
I see.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem I changed the terminology to on number 6 to diversify an economy.
Excellent.
Okay.
And
All right.
number 9 would be more of a tactic underneath number 8, so you can delete number 9.
Okay.
Thank you.
While you're there, Mr. Montgomery, I'm happy to change growing culture for residents to arts and culture and make that be the same because that's what I mean by it.
Got it.
And I also might suggest just not timing the member.
Okay.
I think it's distracting to watch. I don't think anybody's going to go over the 5 minute. And if it seems somebody is, I might politely say, please hurry up. It's just distracting to look at the list that way.
Great.
Ready for more.
Okay. So mine is you can start with wildfire safety and risk mitigation, public safety, climate resiliency, economic development.
Councilmember Rule,
Oh, sorry.
what was your number 3, please?
That's a good question. That's why I was going so quickly. Oh, okay. Did I have, no, I had climate resiliency. Economic development. Thank you. Good God, I have many words for all of this. So, yeah, environmental stewardship, and that may, combine with something. I'll leave that to staff to find out. Fiscal sustainability. Affordable housing for all. And that's important that we put for all there. And I have to do this. Arts, culture, and critical thinking. Sorry, but I got to do it. And I think that that's good for me for right now. Thank you.
Okay, mine, number one.
Sorry, Councilman Reagan. I want Councilman Rule just to take a look at what's up there before we go on, just to make sure we got it as you're wanting to see it. Thank you.
Okay, mine would be communication and relationships with, community, staff, council, emergency, wildfire safety and risk mitigation, public safety, traffic, streets, crosswalks.
Slow down on that one. Let's get
Okay.
number 3, public safety.
Public safety.
Is number 2 how you'd like it written?
Let me see, emergency, wildfire safety, public safety. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Let me see, where am I?
Thank you.
Fiscal sustainability. And arts, music, culture. And that, I'm good with.
You okay?
What is it like?
Yeah, Councilman Reagan, let's have you look at what we have just to make sure you think
Let me
that's
see.
what you said.
Communications and relationships, emergency, wildfires, safety, risk management, yes, public safety. Yep, that'll be fine.
Great, thank you.
All right. So, I did have the fire risk as my top priority, risk mitigation, but I want to make sure that we do a deep dive into the evacuation or shelter in place issue that I think is causing a lot of concern in the community. I think so I have priorities to manage our water future, manage our growth future, manage our traffic.
Water, growth, traffic management.
And manage tourism, protecting our small town character.
Councilmember, are those separate or one goal?
Well, the managing tourism needs to incorporate the protection of small town character.
Okay, so would you say, you mentioned water, you mentioned traffic, you mentioned growth, you mentioned tourism. We have them all listed on one goal, which seems a bit disparate.
Yeah, I think they need to be set.
Okay, so let's let Mr. Montgomery catch up here and list them separately.
And just by
Your management. Of all
just
those.
by explanation, the use of the term management is because I think we have to understand, what our future is and take a deeper dive into data and science to understand how much growth can we absorb, how much, what is our water capacity to accept? I mean, these ones, a lot of them are interrelated. Okay, did you get 4 of those manage things in there?
All 4.
Okay, good. climate sustainability, and I'm fine with using whatever term has been used by other council people. I'd like to see us invest in staff and invest in, and that with the idea that we're going to have more information from our staff to make our decisions. I think we need more information to make good decisions. So I'm interested in looking at how we can, and that's not just for us, but it's for the public as well, to understand reports. And one small point on that, you don't have to put this in, but I really want our reports to have a more thorough analysis of fiscal impacts, because we very frequently get a report that says there's no fiscal impacts without really much analysis of that. Okay, and then let's see. A housing trust. And finally, fiscal sustainability.
Can I ask you? On your number 7, it says staff direction protocol, but didn't you mean staff capacity? You want to increase somehow the capacity of what the staff can offer?
It's potentially an investment in staff, both in terms of quality and number, to be able to manage the amount of information it takes for us to manage the city, or it takes for the city manager to manage the city. Does that make sense?
Staff.
Yeah, it does.
So let's let Councilmember Whitman take a look at the list here.
I can't see.
I changed that to staff capacity protocol. Cool. Subject to change now.
I think you could remove protocol.
Protocol. Right.
Increase staff capacity. He's not mic'd, so that's what he said.
Thank you.
Any? Okay, great. So,
excuse me.
awesome.
Yeah.
So,
can I
yes.
can I make one quick change?
Of course.
So for number 2, Weston, I'm going to change the language of that to match others. Climate resiliency.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mine as well. It's the same thing.
Yeah. Did you get that on me? No, mine says climate sustainability, say climate resiliency.
Okay, so we've
Got
got
it.
Whitman, Gilman,
changing
Lang
Gilman's,
wanting climate resiliency. Okay, let's just let him catch up here.
And Mang. Pardon me. Is that in addition to Councilmember Mang's? Would that be number 6?
I didn't hear that.
Sure, yeah, you can do that. Fine. Thank you.
Okay, so we're adding climate resiliency to Mang as number 6.
Got it.
Are there other changes?
For me,
Yes.
my number 1, housing, I'm thinking that all of the aspects of housing, including, let's say, developing a housing trust, is a tactic for our housing question. So, and I'm assuming that we're going to be focused on affordable. So I think, I don't know, Mr. Whitman, if your housing trust is something specific from the rest of the housing question, or if that's a tactic under housing.
I'm going to argue, if this is okay with the council, that I think a broad goal of housing or affordable housing suffices, and a trust or a development or a legislative change would roll up as a tactic.
That's my thinking. So I'm happy to say that my number 1 is affordable housing, happily.
It's a policy decision. You guys can decide to have it however you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so my thought is that we've talked about a housing trust, but we don't have the mechanics. It hasn't been kind of explained, fleshed out, discussed with the community about what we could potentially do. And so maybe that is a tactic. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Do other members want to change what's listed within their respective list before we move on to the next step?
I think I would like to add affordable housing to my list as well, please.
Number 7, Mang, affordable housing.
And just to be consistent, you can take for all out of mine. Let's just make that
Got it.
inherent
Councilmember
to
Rule,
the term.
remove for all.
Got it.
You got that?
Track.
Okay, great. Any other changes we'd like to see?
Yeah, so change my number 8 to say affordable housing / housing trust.
Okay. Let's give it a minute. Okay.
Got it.
Any other revisions at this point before we move on to the next step?
Yeah.
And actually, Mr. Montgomery, if you'll make it bigger font again, or drop it down again, so it's just, let's not. I have an idea for concentric circles, so just drop down the table if you would. Thank you.
Okay, for number 10 on my list, infrastructure improvement.
Infrastructure improvement, 10 Whitman. Okay.
I'm copying the main.
Okay. Very good. Any other changes? Okay, I'm going to make a suggestion here, and it doesn't have to be this way, but I think one of the easiest things we could do is if we go by member, look at each particular proposed goal, and just see if there are 2 other people that have something that looks to be similar. And then just pause there for a moment and just so we can go one by one. And once we make that determination, I'm just going to keep this view, but bold it. And when it's bold, that means that at least 3 members think this is something that should be a goal. Is that acceptable to the council?
Yes.
All right, so let's start with the mayor and affordable housing. When I look across, and this is why we all need to have eyes on this, I'm seeing at least 3, if not all, that have that. I'm going to say that there are some nuances in some of the titles, but they're largely affordable housing. Is that, do we think that's okay? Okay, so Mr. Montgomery, let's bold that.
Mr. City Manager, should I bold across the 5 columns?
That'd be good. Yeah, so let's take a moment. I think that would be. Now we're getting fancy.
What color would you like?
Should be green, shouldn't it?
Let's start with bold before we get too crazy here. Okay, so it looks like from a quick cursory review, all 5 members want something related to affordable housing. Did any member not want that, and am I misstating any proposed goals?
Great.
Okay, part 2 of the question. For those members that might have a little bit of a different title, can we simply go with affordable housing?
Yes.
I'm seeing head nods.
I think I would like to add trust to mine.
Would 5 members want trust on theirs, or 3 members want trust, or do?
For
Again,
me,
it's-
trust is going to be there, but it's a tactic among the other tactics. So I'm not excluding that. I'm thinking it will be a tactic that we will also have under the main heading.
That would be my assumption as well.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to just take a flyer here. Mr. Montgomery, change affordable housing on all members to just simply read affordable housing. So if it says / housing trust, we're going to go with the premise that that will be a tactic. So we've got 5 affordable housing.
Done.
Congratulations, you have your first goal. Great. Let's move on, because this will also be another easy one, I think. Wildlife prep, risk reduction, wildfire preparation.
I'm happy to change mine to wildfire safety and risk mitigation. No problem. That's what I mean.
Okay, so I see a lot of overlap. I
Mhm.
think every single member has that. Is that title acceptable to this council? Or would you like something different? I'm seeing 3 people nod their heads.
It's acceptable
Yeah,
to me.
I'm good
I-
with that title.
Okay.
Me too.
All right,
And-
so let's give it a moment here. So
I just, under Mr. Whitman, just to say what you have parenthetically, I am thinking that will be part of what the tactic will be also. I
That
mean,
will-
it's on my agenda too.
yeah, that will be a tactic of many.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, and that's great. If they here in the audience, if they're all bold, that's awesome. That's fantastic. That's what you want. Okay, so wildfire safety risk mitigation across the board. Great. Okay, now one that may or may not have universal, but I don't know. Arts and culture funding.
Now, let me just, the reason why I labeled it just the larger is only this. You could say music is also one of the arts, so you don't have to have that separate. But when I was thinking of culture, I'm also thinking of young families, more recreation. So I was thinking of culture in that sense to include that. So somebody had something like, we saw it in the survey rather, recreation. I'm thinking that also falls under culture funding. So however you guys want to phrase that, that's what I'm thinking. And I think probably maybe all of us are thinking, yes, more arts, yes, more things for young families to do, whatever we want to phrase that.
I would say that I understand what you're saying, but when I think of culture, I don't think of recreation for families. I mean, I agree with the idea, but we might be able to find arts, culture, and
community.
Community
Yeah,
building. Something like that.
Arts, culture, and community building, development.
Community.
It's engagement.
Something
like
that's
that.
Good. Arts, community engagement.
Yeah.
Community.
Is there something wrong with just arts and culture?
Well, I just don't see sort of I mean, culture. I don't see semantically that it represents the idea of community engagement with young families or recreation. Not that it couldn't.
Arts, culture, and recreation.
Here's why I'm asking this. If you just called it something like arts and culture or arts, culture, and recreation, you're going to have tactics that are going to roll up to that are going to explain how you're going to, in this case, engage young families to provide more opportunities or whatever it is.
I think adding recreation is absolutely fine. I think
arts, culture, and recreation. Yeah, cool, great.
Arts, culture, and recreation. Okay, so now that we've agreed on that, let's take a quick spin through all the members here.
Going now to Mayor Pro Tem Lang's number 7.
Yep, that works.
Okay.
And then rule number 8.
Yeah, well.
Hold on.
Don't say it too quick.
Hold on. Let's let Councilmember Rule weigh in on.
I'm trying to think if critical thinking can fall into arts, culture, or recreation.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's very important to me that we do some sort of, that we get people thinking critically. That's, I think, a great lack right now.
If you do think of critical thinking in the sense of culture, like in literature, reading groups, philosophy.
I could. I definitely could. And so I think I'm okay with that, arts, culture, and recreation, and then we can work on tactics that might or might not find a majority here.
Thank you.
Excellent. We can work on that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Montgomery, arts, culture, recreation.
The remaining would be Councilmember Mang's number 5 here.
Okay, so I'm seeing at least 4 with that.
Correct.
And I'm going to say, please bold that. Okay. I'll let you catch up. And all the bold guys are going to eventually come off on a separate list here in a second, but we're probably going to take a break to let Weston kind of do that so we don't. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, Mr. Montgomery, just let us know when you're feeling ready. Okay. So now we're on infrastructure improvement. And
so for me, just to say, it's very much the nuts and bolts conversation. It's paving, it's the roadways, it's the waterways, and in my mind, one of those tactics does overlap with some of what has been said. When I see warming climate, one of the infrastructure improvements I would want to introduce that I think other people would too is, do we look at those paving projects or canopy, anything of those things, and say, how do we reduce our carbon emission, make it more sustainable? So that would be one of the features of it. But the infrastructure improvement, I'm thinking what we all generally think of is what, all the building stuff that happens in our town that makes our roads okay and our waterways fine.
So in my thought in adding that to my list is that I want to make, so I know we have a program for infrastructure improvement. I think it's always an open door to say, hey, we need to, work on this, but I want to make sure that it's, in the priority category so that when we talk about budget, where are we allocating money? that we constantly keep in mind our infrastructure.
I agree.
And I have a more general question. Is there some sort of visual or diagrammic way to show the sort of cross-cutting tactics or concepts, you know, that, in other words, how are we going to be able to...
When we get there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we think we'll be able to do that. I'm just curious if there's a way to say, you know, that this tactic belongs under climate resiliency and it also belongs under infrastructure improvement because it's, you know, solar panels or whatever it happens to be. Is there a way to visually represent that? Or are we planning to visually represent that?
I don't think we'll be able to visually represent that this evening. I understand
No,
what you're saying.
not this evening. Heck
Okay,
no.
okay.
Heck no.
Yes, no, I would like to get to where you're talking about.
Okay.
I'll have an offline with you as to understanding the vision there.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I'm envisioning tonight is once we have all of our bold items, new screen comes up. Those are the starting point for the goals, and we go one by one and try to come up with some tactics to go with it.
Yeah, I apologize if I stepped a couple of steps ahead.
No, it's okay. You're thinking. I love it. You're thinking about the process.
It's all good. Thank you.
It's great. Okay, so where do we end? We're still on infrastructure improvement, and we're trying to decide. Is there a better? I see a lot of infrastructure across the board, at least 3. Is there a better title that we like?
I think it's maintenance and improvement. And to Mayor Gilman, to your point, that when I mentioned the warming climate, that's exactly what I was talking about. How can we do things better? So it is improvement, but it's also, let's make sure our streets stay paved and that Lindy's really taken care of.
So I might see that as tactics within infrastructure maintenance and improvement. You're explaining how you'd like those things to happen, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think it's a cross over to fiscal sustainability as well.
Right.
Well, I see fiscal sustainability, if you don't mind me offering some input, as a separate goal.
Right. No, I'm not.
You're just saying they're related.
I'm just saying that.
I see. I'm sorry.
That in order to assess fiscal sustainability,
Yes.
we need to look at our infrastructure.
Yes. Okay.
Agreed.
Sorry, understood. Okay, so are we okay with infrastructure maintenance and improvement as the general goal title for now? And again, you can change this later. It doesn't have to be this. So let's just let Mr. Montgomery go through each member and see. Let's see.
We have 3, second being, pardon me, Mayor Pro Tem Lang, and the third is Councilmember Whitman here, number 10.
Okay, so I'm going to say that that's going to be bold. Great. Ready?
Ready.
Okay, so now we are on diversifying economy.
Or safety, traffic, but
Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped right over
public
that.
safety is what I
Sorry.
mean by that.
Public safety?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
So you don't have to parenthetically say traffic. I think public safety covers the bigger subject. So that would be, the tactics would be things like speed limits, et cetera, et cetera.
Got it.
I see a second there with Councilmember Rules, number 2.
So you can probably move my traffic management to the public safety column.
Okay, great.
Cool.
And then Mang.
And I'll just reference really quickly. I think we need to do a deep evaluation of managing the interface between pedestrians and vehicles from Ventura Street to Fox Street. And it's a traffic slowdown issue, and it's a safety issue that we have a constant, kind of flow back and forth across the street.
So that's a terrific, detailed tactic.
You don't need.
No, it's great. It's great. That's
it's
a
going
tactic.
to be a long list of stuff.
That's
like
a very
that.
detailed tactic.
No,
and
I'm not proposing to add it. I'm just.
But
saying
but in all seriousness, that is the type of granularity that we are looking for, so that we can be successful. So
Yeah.
okay, so we see public safety
I should have had that on mine, and I wrote it down on my list, but I didn't.
You're
I didn't
entitled
make
to
it
add
to
it.
there, so I
You're
want to
entitled
add
to
that.
Now, that would make 5.
Great.
Pardon that. Go back.
Hang on a second. Let him catch up here.
That's
Okay.
5.
Now I jumped ahead. We're on diversifying economy or something economic development. Just looking, also I would add, argue that tourism management also is kind of related to that too. I see at least 3 or 4 in that area. What do we feel, council, about the title for this goal?
To me, what's interesting about diversifying, I think Ms. Lang said it more aptly, which is diversifying away from tourism as the central or the main source, that you think we're resilient now across some industries, and it means lots of tactics. How do we work with businesses, chamber, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So that's what diversifying the economy has meant to me for a long time.
Okay, so I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
and you're basically rolling in tourism management into that, is what I'm hearing. Am I hearing that correctly?
I don't want to speak
I'll
for
just
you.
explain
Yeah.
on tourism management. My thought there is that one of the biggest complaints I hear is that I can't live in my town, especially on weekends. And so I'm looking for strategies so that our residents feel more like this is their town.
Absolutely.
And that's my concept of tourism management. So it isn't so much diversification. Well, it might be just a much, broader topic for me.
If I might, to me, they're very close in this way, but I knew what you meant, but it's slightly different, but worth noting. So the diversifying the economy gives, if let's say there's more businesses that can employ more people here that live here. Okay, so that's a traffic reduction, people are living here, and the energy we would put into it would not be more tourism because we've got plenty of that. And what
Right.
you're saying, I think, is when projects come up for us that are tourist focused, we're thinking of our larger plan about our residents, and we're saying, are we at capacity on tourism? But we seems to me we want to be saying that housing and jobs are a big part of what we mean by capacity and flourishing. So they're very close.
I don't disagree
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
but I would also add that, my concept is that we even look at, our existing relationship with tourism, and recognizing that we are financially sustainable in large part because of tourism.
I'm open to that.
But how do we make that kind of reality more palatable to
So
our community?
I'm going to jump in. When you get into the how, now you're talking about a tactic.
Right.
Fair enough.
So let's come up with a goal title that reflects what we're trying to do.
Yep.
Well, how about we just add tourism management to the economic diversity as a slash line? And I think we're all sort of talking about the same thing.
Do I have?
That's fine.
Okay,
I'm
so
totally
it looks
cool with
like
that.
I'm getting 3 people nodding their head.
I'm good with that too.
Changing
Yeah.
it to diversifying economy / tourism management.
Yep.
Okay.
Mhm.
So Mr. Montgomery, let's just make that update. Thank you, council, for working with me. Okay. I see one under rule that you passed over,
Let's go
economic
back.
development.
One at a time. Okay.
Okay.
It's fine to change that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Whitman, number 5.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so there you go.
Okay.
Good.
So, all right, great. Okay, now we're on to climate resiliency, I think.
Maybe we got 5 already.
Okay, do we have any changes there that we need to make?
No.
Okay, great. That's an easy one. Thank you.
We have all 5 there.
So let's just let you go ahead and bold that.
And you also have 5 fiscal sustainabilities.
Perfect. Okay, so let's just catch up on that. And then we can see if we have any orphans that have.
So easy.
We're on it.
Then we can see if we have any orphans where there's 3. So let's.
So this
Are
will
you
be
all
taking out broadband title to make it uniform.
okay? Okay, so this becomes an eye chart, and I'll ask anybody to help me. You can count to 3 on anything that's not bold. Please let me know. And remember, you have to count to 3.
Now, I want to say what I see in Ms. Lang's is communication plan, and then I see under Mang, communication and relationships. I would happily add as my number 9 something about communications plan. I think that's worthy and a good thing to work on.
Okay. Do Lang and Mang have thoughts about that? Does that sound consistent with what you were envisioning?
Yes,
Yep.
definitely.
Okay.
And so the title is communication plan, or what do you want to call it?
Well, I think communication and relationships, because the plan could
Communication and
be a
relationships is
tactic
fine with
underneath
me.
that. Yeah, I'm
I
good
like
with
communication and relationships better because a
Me
plan
too.
is more of a
It's a
how.
tactic.
So
Let's do
Yeah.
it.
And then another question. So on Councilmember Whitman's number 7, it falls kind of into that.
It could.
it could be a tactic within there, I think, or you could,
Your 7 is increased staff capacity.
It wasn't related to communications, but I mean, it wasn't specific to
Well,
it.
I mean, it actually is in the sense that every time we get a report, it's a communication.
I see what you mean.
I see it as a
So,
tactic.
and- yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so so now we have communications and relationships.
And I'll be changing.
Yeah, let's
now
let you catch up.
Mayor
Sorry.
Pro Tem Lang.
Right.
And the third is Councilmember Mang.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, actually, you can change my increased staff capacity as
Fantastic.
Got it.
apparently
Wonderful.
a tactic under that one.
Great.
Okay. Other orphans that we have there where there's 3. I don't see any. Anybody want to lobby somebody to make a change?
I think that for my number 5, environmental stewardship can actually go under climate resiliency
Outstanding.
as a tactic
Sounds good.
of
Thank
some
you.
sort.
Thank you.
Oh, I already have climate
so you
resiliency
can
up
just
there.
remove it.
Yeah,
Okay, that's great.
yeah, just
You can just.
delete.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, I don't see any other orphans, and so
Yeah.
No, delete
On
rules
mine,
number
I've got-
5.
I've got water management and I've got growth management.
Pardon me, I've missed a step.
No.
This number 5 for Councilmember Rule.
You can just remove
Delete it. Yeah, thank you.
okay, so then we're gonna go to Whitman and remove 2 and 3. Because
I'm
again,
not
we're-
asking you to remove them. I'm just there.
you can leave
there.
them. It's fine. You can leave. Okay, fair enough. Let's
But-
not remove them.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna the next step.
Those may end up being
Fair point.
within
I bet.
Please don't remove
the
them.
housing approach and
I bet they will
all the
too.
rest.
Okay, so what I'd like to do now, if council is okay with it, is I'd like to give Mr. Montgomery about 5 minutes. I'd like for him to develop that just below this, Mr. Montgomery. I want a list of each of the goals, and then I want 5 blank numbers below each one, and we'll see if we can come up with 5 tactics for each of the proposed goals.
Got
That
it.
make sense?
Mhm.
And so you're not going to see that table anymore. All you're going to see is this new list with the goals, 5 numbers below it. Does that make sense?
Got it.
Okay. And you might need to do 2 columns so it fits. Make sense?
Make it work.
Okay, cool.
Think hard.
So Mayor, I would suggest if you agree.
Let's take a 10-minute break.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Check, check, check. Okay, everyone, we're going to start again. Thank you. We were just about to move into, we've settled on these big items, and we were going to get into what are some quick tactics. And I know we reached out already to some people in the audience to maybe offer some guidance, but we have a alternative proposal we'll consider. Mr. Harvey.
Yes, Mayor. During the break, I heard from a couple members individually that there's a desire potentially to maybe spend some more thoughtful time on the tactics, allow each council member to not only meet with me, but also talk to their various constituents and more thoughtfully develop a list of tactics rather than having to splash down some things this evening, which is completely fine. And if it's the desire of the council, even though we probably have some people that are here in the audience might want to put forth a tactic or two tonight, maybe the council could direct me to meet individually with council members to talk about each of the areas and come up with some proposed tactics. And I could also meet with the subject matter experts that might be here or not here tonight, and then come back with a draft list of 5 to 10 tactics by each potential goal. If that's the pleasure of the council, that's one way to do it for sure.
Can I just ask real quick, that graph that you just put together, Weston, when will should we take a screenshot, or when could we have that so we can start?
Weston would be able, Mr. Montgomery would be able to email that out to you as early as this evening.
Oh.
So that you could, start noodling on that, if you will.
It doesn't have to be this evening.
Okay.
Can be.
Take the night off.
Yeah, right.
What I do like about, sorry, Ms. Roll, go.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, I like that idea to have time to ponder and
Let's
to
do that.
really figure out what the term means and
Myself
how that might play out. I think it's important to give it some time.
So just each member should know I will be pressing each one of you to talk to me individually about this. I do want your direct feedback. I don't think that's a problem. But thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say what Ms. Rule said. I would love to meet with subject matter experts in more detail and then try to think very thoughtfully, and especially probably find a lot of ways where there's overlap, which would be really fantastic.
Or that tactics have already been developed.
Fair
and
enough.
They are like, yep, that's the one I would do. Check.
Great.
So then the big elephant in the room question is, do we think, so I'm just going to flash forward with what's coming offshore with your agendas. So I'm going to say that in a perfect world, I'd say, great, we'll take this on a month from now on the 25th of March. Well, I'm not going to recommend the 25th of March because that is when the Cabin Village project is coming back before the city council. That's not a good night to do this. So your question then remains, do you think that we can do this between now and the 11th of March, or do we need to move this to the first meeting in April? And it's fine either way, as far as like a fiscal planning perspective, because I didn't see any goals that you came up with that are completely out of left field, that are things that we're not already thinking about.
Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say I would be open to having a special meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even like next Tuesday or at another time to.
I'd like more time than that.
Okay.
Talk to people about tactics, but,
Possibly between the 11th and the 25th, possibly.
Yes.
I don't mind a special meeting at all. I like the idea. More than a week sounds good. And I would like to move it forward, though, only so that some tactics we probably would like to initiate right away, at least their research. So not delaying that sounds like what the community is really asking us to do, especially on some of the issues.
So I'm hearing sometime between the 11th and the 25th. Could we just settle on Mr. Montgomery, are you able to pull up a little calendar just really quick? I hate to do this to everybody, but I've had some trouble trying to schedule special meetings of
You
late.
want to do the Tuesday that's in between?
Well, the Tuesday, that's the 18th, and we have our Brown Act
We do.
meeting that night.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Right.
And then what's, okay, so that's...
You were concerned about the 11th because it's too soon? Or because we already have a full agenda?
I'm just wondering, 11th is fine. Mr. Montgomery, am I able to put you on the spot and see what's on the working agenda? Can you access that from here?
Yes, I can. That would be much easier than a calendar.
Okay, then give us a moment here.
A few seconds.
Just want to refresh my memory as to what's on that agenda already. Pardon me. Oh, Mr. Almeida on the spot. Let's see here. I have a hard copy, which you don't have, so Weston's going to pull that up. Okay.
I have it also.
Okay, I'm going to make a suggestion. On the 11th already, under the discussion section, you have the mid-year budget update and the budget reserve policy. Now, you can keep it on that agenda if you want. If you don't mind moving that to the first meeting in April, that might clear some room, unless there's a desire to have the mid-year budget update on the 11th.
No, that doesn't in any way affect Mr. Alameda being able to move forward with his goal of anything, creating the next year's budget. If it doesn't affect him,
it does not.
Then I'm fine with that.
So I'm going to suggest that so this is looking good for the 11th.
Okay.
It's fine. Okay, now we're prepared to deliver a 90-day pickleball update. That might bring a lot of folks out. If you want to suggest, I'm just going to suggest that maybe putting goals first on the discussion item.
Good.
And then seeing where everything else falls out.
Okay.
This is a decision.
No,
for
no,
you
no.
guys.
I definitely don't. I want to do what we said we were going to do for sure. So I don't want to have that. I wouldn't want to put that at the end. It seems to me what you could say is the housing trust. I'm not trying to lose sight of that either. But if we are going to say the housing trust is an aspect of what we're bringing forward, you could remove housing trusts there. I'm not trying to.
I see that as a tactic that likely has 3 supports for it. So I think.
Oh, me too.
So I think that it's not going to fall off. I mean, if you want to just say we don't need to have that on the working agenda, we know that that's going to roll up to
I'm suggesting that
a goal.
as a possibility.
Councilmember Whitman, are you okay with that? Or do you want to keep that on there as it is right now? Or do you want to think about that?
I guess my question would be then, when will we have kind of a deep dive explanation of what we can do vis-a-vis a housing trust?
So this is then going to, it'll be delayed a little further because it's going to be determined by the work plan and the effort involved, but it'll be on the work plan and it'll be detailed. So you won't be losing sight of it. It just won't be happening the discussion will not be as quickly as it is now.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I would, I would also be okay with doing the idea of doing a special meeting on the 8th, but I'll do either of those two.
But we have a conflict because of the Brown Act.
We do. We have Brown Act training that day.
Okay.
Okay, so Mr. Montgomery, I'm hearing mid-year budget update and budget reserve policy can move to April somewhere, okay?
Can I just, Mr. Alameda, those are ones that you brought to us and we moved those both. Is that okay with you? It is? Yeah, okay, okay.
We're going to keep pickleball and we're going to just delete housing trust, not deleting it, but just deleting it from
Moving
this
it.
document.
Okay.
And instead, on the 11th, Mr. Montgomery, we're going to put council goals and tactics continued, which I already see you have on there. Great.
Wonderful. I think this is worth a lot. Not waiting too long.
I agree.
Great. And then we could do our research.
And then again, Mr. Montgomery will email out to you all tomorrow morning what you agreed upon tonight, and you can start fleshing out your tactics. I'm sorry to all the people that wanted to submit tactics this evening, but we will be contacting you for assistance. So.
Thank you. Yes, wonderful. We've got it.
I don't think we need any more direction
so
from council. I appreciate the discussion very much.
This is great. Okay. Thank you, everybody. All right, so moving on. We are on discussion item number 3, 2-member request, resolution adopting a city council policy to consider local issues only. Shall I start that since I was one?
Sure. Staff can provide a brief report.
Oh,
but
go
you're
ahead.
also welcome
No,
to-
you start and I'll follow up.
So as noted, this is a request from 2 council members, Mayor Gilman and Councilmember Whitman. It's for the council to consider adopting a resolution that would define the scope of its legislative and administrative actions, focusing on local issues, excluding national, international, and global issues that have no direct application to city operations or city residents. The council can adopt the resolution as drafted. The council cannot adopt the resolution as drafted or may modify it as desired. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm happy to hear from Councilmember Whitman as well. I wanted to express the intention of this and why I'm interested in it is that over the past year and a half, it's one of the central issues that I have heard at almost every meeting, which was the desire to focus on things that are directly related to citizens of Ojai, and they meant that very plainly, like roads and safety and fire. So it isn't that I'm troubled by something that's happening not here, but very specifically driving on the road. And so I took that pretty seriously. And from my perspective, it seemed that some of the energy, effort on things that were not directly related to things that happen in Ojai were very divisive in our community. So that's why I'm interested in doing this in this way. We can certainly talk about the details, but that's the intention. Anything to add?
I support this as, as long as that we have the ability to address a local issue that the federal government has decided to weigh in on in some fashion, but it's not beyond our jurisdiction to address that issue.
What's an example?
Just a
Oh, sorry.
quick point of order.
Please.
Are we having discussion now?
No. I was trying to give like my version of the staff report, but I'll stop now.
No,
Happily.
I mean, you can continue. I'm just wondering where we are.
That's
in
what
the
I was
process.
intending to do, is
Okay.
to say what's the intention of it, and then Mr. Whitman was offering his intention. But happy to go to the next step.
I mean, I think it's in what I'm talking about is in the language of.
Okay. Well, any
I'm
questions?
happy to
then?
hear any clarification. I was just wondering.
I think I clarified it.
Okay,
I
thank
was
you.
thinking the thing that becomes interesting that I think we'll hear from the public, and maybe we could ask Mr. Summers as well, is when we look at the language, we might wonder what constitutes the right kind of thing for us to work on and what doesn't. And when we say affect or directly affect, what do we mean? It seems to me that's interesting. So anyway, any questions for Mr. Summers or Mr. Harvey before we go to public comment?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Mr. Summers said national and international. Does that exclude or include state? Does that become national? I mean, are we not? Just curious, like definitionally, what that means.
So on the state component, it's about issues that have direct effect on the boundaries of the city or residents in the city. But there's the direct language in Section 2 that excludes national, international, and global issues. So if there was a state issue that had no impact on the city, that would arguably also be excluded. But the council could revise that language if desired. And that's also picked up in Section 4 is if there was a state issue that did impact the city, then the council could consider it.
Right. I did have a follow-up question, but I lost it. So,
Well, can I follow up on your question?
Of
If
course.
that's okay. If when I see section 1 of page 3-4, and it says, in its deliberations, the city council shall only consider policies, resolutions, ordinances, and actions that directly impact the health, safety, and welfare of residents and visitors, infrastructure, economy, and environment within the boundaries of the city of Ojai. I'm taking that to mean that's, in a way, that's our large demarcation about what we would take up and deliberate about. So it would have to directly affect the people within the boundaries of the city limits in those ways.
affect or effect?
I think the logical one would be affect with an A.
Okay, affect with an A.
Mm-hmm.
Would it affect them?
Because the effect would be the
can get
consequence.
we can get into language and things like that, which I'm sure we will.
Okay,
Thank you.
let's do.
Yeah.
Okay.
We will, but after, in discussion.
Okay. Are we ready for public comment? Okay. Larry Steingold, Bill Miley, and Renee Roth.
Larry Steingold, good evening.
Hello.
We just spent maybe an hour on Ojai priorities. We've been spending a lifetime on Ojai priorities. There are 4.5 square miles here. There are 8,000 feet. The symbol is Ojai, city of Ojai. First, last, and always, roads, security, sustainability, fiscal, park and rec, culture, all these wonderful things are all about the city of Ojai. Not about Sacramento, not about Washington, not about Jerusalem or Cancun or Paris. It doesn't matter. It's all about the city of Ojai. It's me walking outside my street and looking up at the stars at 10 o'clock at night and going, what a great place to live. It's walking down the street and just living here. It's all about Ojai. I'm interested in, I live here on a day-to-day basis. Everybody lives here. They don't live in Ventura. They want the roads paved. They want the sidewalks fixed. They want trees that blow up in the fire cut down. They want fire hardening. They want park and rec. They want affordable housing. Focus here. Anything that distracts you from your mission, go run for Congress. Go run for mayor. Is that this is your mission here, okay, to keep Ojai the way we came here, you came here, you remain here for a reason. If you wanted it to be somewhere else, you'd go. I don't want to change it to somewhere else. I mean, I'm as big and NIMBY as anybody. But it's concentrate on Ojai. My taxes go to Ojai here. Where money goes, it doesn't matter. But it's getting it done. It's just moving forward. Let's commit action. Action here. Focus on Ojai. Ojai's your job. You're city councilors of Ojai. You're not state senators. You're not Congress people. You're not whatever. This is your chosen job. And hopefully it's my job to help you stay focused on getting it done. Okay, because better you than me. Because to me it looks too much like work. But seriously, I mean, it's all about Ojai. It's Ojai first, last. And I intend to be here forever as far as I'm concerned. So I want it to remain why we came here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steingold. Bill Miley, Renee Roth, and Starchild.
Hello. I have several comments about the proposed ordinance. The past Israeli-Gaza issue comes quickly to mind. There are many new faces we saw then. I haven't seen them now, since. That issue the city government did not have any control over, didn't have any influence on, or impact locally other than kind of separated us for a while. Other than citizen attitude, information, and opinion, which got expressed, if we'd had an ordinance like being proposed tonight, it would have been kept to 3-minute public communications. So, comments about the proposed draft. Section 1A, scope. Restricting it to the city of Ojai should be modified to add, or the intermix of city and county responsibilities. Traffic, water, earthquake, flooding, homeless. Section 1B, issues. Add public health, public welfare, pretty standard. And please define the term Ojai community. It includes the Ojai Valley, in my opinion.
Okay.
Section 2 and 3 are okay. Section 4, the first section 4, define local community and visitors to the community. Who are they? It really includes the entire Ojai Valley. Section 4, which was a typo, again defined Ojai community. I consider it the Ojai Valley. We legislate within the city boundaries. We influence beyond, and we listen to folks within and without our city boundaries. And we consider the impact on the whole Ojai Valley. I support the proposal as I have modified it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miley. Renee Roth, Starchild, and Jody Lewis.
Good evening. While I appreciate the intent, I'm really surprised that this is being brought as an issue before the council with a draft of a resolution before it was even discussed by members of the council. So that is the first mark of what was going on behind closed doors to make this into a resolution. And why did it get along this far between two members of the council? That is very disturbing to me period. And then my second question that I always go to is, do we have anything else that this could be added to instead of a separate resolution or a separate ordinance? I think we do. I think our protocols document should and could be modified to say we want to focus on local issues. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I also don't think the Gaza thing and other things that have come up are appropriate. I appreciate that, but I think there's other ways to handle it. I don't think we need another resolution to handle one more specific issue, but include it in the protocols document and get to that modification sooner rather than later. Thank you. Oh,
Thank
and
you,
one
Ms.
last
Roth.
thing.
Yeah.
Is it going to be good for the residents of Ojai? A ember-driven high fire knows no boundaries of where it's going to land and whose responsibility it is to take care of it. It's going to be all of our responsibilities to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Roth. Star Child, Jody Lewis, and Elena Pascarella.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, wrote Martin Luther King from his jail cell in Birmingham. Would the two Andys support a resolution to release Martin Luther King from jail? I opposed the ceasefire resolution. I condemn the terrorist organization Hamas. I believe there can be no peace as long as Hamas can harm Gazans or Israelis. I condemn the language in the ceasefire language, calling to release political prisoners in fair exchange for hostages and prisoners. I'm reminded of over a week ago when Kafir Bibas and his brother Ariel, his bodies were released by Hamas. What fair exchange was there? They were released in exchange for convicted terrorists, and their bodies were buried in the land of their ancestors, eventually next to the body of their mother. So, why do I oppose this resolution today? Because it would leave unamendable the flawed ceasefire resolution. We can never ask for amendment. We can never ask for repeal of it. That's not what I want. I stand for peace. I hate war. And I hate terrorism. I learned from the ceasefire supporters. I stand out there between Libby and the arcade on Fridays in the evening whenever I can. I remember what happened to Hind Rajab, who was killed, only a young child. And I agree with one thing that the ceasefire resolution says, that all human life is precious, and Ojai's commitment as an international city of peace calls on elected officials to promote peace for all people. This proposal will not focus our energies. If you don't want to talk about Gaza, international subjects, then just don't do it. But right now we're talking about it. If council wants to override the resolution, they will. It will only take 3 votes. It's not up to you to decide what future councils can discuss. That's up to the voters. That's up to the people. This resolution is not prudence. It's apathy. It's cowardice masquerading as wisdom. This resolution does not save time. It shirks the responsibility of this city council to stand for justice.
Thank you, Star Child. Jody Lewis, Ellen Pascarella, and Alan Greenberg.
Hi, I'm Jody Lewis.
Hello.
I don't know how we can parse what's local and what's global and what's hyper-local community and what's a larger community. I read a novel once where there was a little town in the middle of the woods, and they kind of built a bramble around themselves, and they opted out of World War I in Europe, right? No one ever found them. They had all they needed there. They never had to go outside. No one had to come in. But that's not this. We are not that. This is not that time. And as much as our surfers might hate it, locals only is a fiction. There is no longer a local issue that's not global, a global issue that's not local. Case in point, the two most central city council goals agreed on tonight deal with the climate crisis and the housing crisis. Global issues, local issues. The issues of our time are the issues of our town. Just as it's dawned on us that these issues are inextricably intersectional, climate crisis, racism, sexism, poverty, immigration, oppression, body sovereignty, homelessness, LGBTQ+, it's time to get that the issues that affect our citizens have no borders. Case in point, 6 young men last night, right across out of my living room window, had a knockdown, drag-out brawl outside the window at midnight, yelling and threatening each other with every kind of horrifying hate speech I have ever heard. Every one of the issues I just mentioned were screamed at each other, including threatening to call ICE. All these issues are hyper-local and are being literally fought out in the streets of our neighborhoods right now in real time. Here's another one. Our town's largely funded by the billionaire Crown family, owners of the Ojai Valley Inn and founders of the largest stakeholders of the 5th largest weapons manufacturer on the planet, General Dynamics. Any lands and all people being bombed into oblivion by this country and our proxies, the Crown family, General Dynamics, and our city budget is fattened off the abject suffering of millions. That is local. Lastly, we claim ourselves as an international city of peace. I mean, it's a global membership organization which states in its essential goal that its essential goal is, quote, to certify and recommend thousands of self-organized municipalities as cities of peace in order to put into motion a tipping force for global peace. That is our local responsibility as a member of this international body. So let's be real. For a small local town, Ojai has a global reputation and ties. Clinton and Bezos have been here in this past year. We're home to global spiritual movements, global documentarians, international celebrities, global justice writers, neighbors from Palestine, neighbors from Israel, and the list goes on, live here. The local is global and the global is local. Anything else?
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Elena Pascarella and then Alan Greenberg.
Good evening, Council.
Hello.
Thank you all for taking time for us, and welcome to the new members and you, Andy. Actually, I remember seeing you write something about this before the election when you were elected, and you thought about how the ceasefire issue, and by the way, I'm here. Remember, he said he didn't see any of us here, but some of us are here from the Gaza ceasefire issue, and you said that it was divisive and dividing our community. And I feel that by not talking about things, our community still remains divided. And I'm appreciative of what Star Child said and quoted about how important it is for us to communicate with each other and how he goes out there and we're still talking to each other. And one of the things that concerns me right now, which is an international issue, a national issue, is the issue of immigration, right? And how people in our community are afraid, and just how Jody spoke about ICE coming in. So if you make this an issue that we can't even talk about things and bring up our concerns to you because it's a national issue, then I think it's going to stop us from protecting people in our community. Just recently in Texas, a young girl, her name was Jocelyn Rojo Carranza, may she rest in peace. She was 11 years old and committed suicide because she was bullied about her parents' immigration status. A few weeks ago, I stood out in the rain with about 70 students from Nordhoff who were protesting the issue of ICE in our community. And so I don't want to be stopped from talking about this and bringing it to you. In fact, I would like our city to be a sanctuary city. And if you pass a resolution like this, then we're not going to be able to talk about that. And I feel that it's important that we talk about this issue because the children and the parents in our community are suffering. They're the ones who rake our lawns, watch our children. They're keeping the tourism afloat by working for us. And I feel that this segment of our community isn't recognized and appreciated. And we need to be able to talk about it in these public spaces because our federal government is not acting in dignity with regards to immigrants. And I just want you to vote no for this resolution so that we can be able to talk about things and people in our community that we care about.
Thank you very much. Alan Greenberg.
I want to thank both Andys for bringing this up, and I completely disagree with the speaker who just was at this rostrum. If somebody in this town is afraid, they should not be afraid unless they're guilty of a felony, rape, murder, or a serious crime. Otherwise, I'm so tired of hearing, oh, everybody's going to be sent back. No, they're not. It's been made clear as a bell, that the people who are going to be sent back are the ones who are a threat to our safety. Period. And talking about a sanctuary city makes my blood boil. In this particular resolution, it's actually too loose. We shouldn't be talking about something that happened in Nebraska or in Wyoming. It doesn't mention anything about other states. They should be excluded. Also should be excluded is any other issue. There's an open gap there that says, well, we could talk about anything if the council decides to do it. That opens up the whole can of worms. Either you're going to take care of the people and the infrastructure of this town, or as Larry said, you belong in a different legislative body. You should only be concerned about what's going on right here. I had no objection to the elephant thing because it's about elephants here. It's not about elephants in Ventura or some other place. The chaos that took place a year ago can only be described as embarrassing. And two of the people that ended up voting for that ridiculous resolution are now gone from the council, including the mayor, who looked me right in the eye a week before and told me that resolution will never be passed. And then she was the vote that put it on the agenda, and she was the clinching vote as well. This is just chaos to bring in all this outside information. So I'm very much in favor of it, and I think it needs to be tightened up so that all the council is doing is what's going on right here. I do think it should include, and I'm not sure if it does, I would say anything in the 93023 zip code, because there are a lot of people living right across the border. If you take one step outside, you cannot eliminate them. You have to be concerned about their welfare as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenberg. Casey Abbott.
Goodness, the audacity of a resolution saying to stay on task. What's wrong with you people? I don't want to see this become a refuge city for people who cross the border illegally and punch me in the face and knock my front teeth out when they're drunk, steal my jobs, raking leaves for others and caring for their children. I've had a lifetime struggling against people who look the other way real hard, namely Republicans and Democrats. But they neither one is very interested in guys like me trying to work for a living. But yeah, we could just stick to what works locally. If you have that as a resolution, you don't have to enact it and call it up every time, but you may. So I'd say go ahead and pass it. Have a good one.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Mr. Montgomery, anything online?
Mayor, we have no raised hands, but Zoom participants, we are now on item number 3 on tonight's agenda, And we do have one raised hand now from L. Hecker. L, you have the opportunity to speak.
Hi, this is Leah Hecker. I'm calling in to support this resolution, and I have a completely different reason than everybody else was talking here. I actually think that everybody who was talking proves why it's a wise thing to have. It's not so much about relitigating Gaza or whatever, but what's happening currently in our politics is, I think, very divisive. And I think it's going to get worse and not better. And I think for you to recognize and focus on this little place of land here where we all live together and that we all want to share in is wise. And I think it's going to be hard enough. I see there are going to be more and more topics that one side feels like this and the other side feels like that, and they will look to you to discuss it, and we all will maybe, because it's mind-blowing. However, to recognize holding us together, focusing on us in pragmatic and touchable ways is very smart. So not to say, oh, Gaza yes, Gaza no, or whatever else there was, but to give a very clear commitment to everybody in this town and to the things that we find important and space to discuss these things is smart in my eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hecker. Anything else?
No more raised hands, Mayor.
Okay, so we'll close the public comment.
I'll start.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
For our legal advisor.
Mm-hmm.
The way I read this ordinance does not prevent anyone from coming up to the podium during public comment and criticizing the president or anybody else or asking us, the community, to think about a particular topic. This is simply focused to those issues that we will take up as a council.
Yes, as presently drafted, this limits the council's agenda. It doesn't limit public comment.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Ms. Rule.
Yeah, well, Andy, you and I have spoken about this many times, and I am 100% against it. I think that we have a mandate as representatives and as elected officials. We derive our authority from the people who elect us. And when my constituents ask me to address a certain item, I do not feel it is within my power to say to them, I'm sorry. I'm not going to address that. That to me is the antithesis of what a representative government is about. It is not up to me to determine what concerns of theirs are legitimate, especially when it's obvious that it is true and real to them. As far as what affects people, what are we talking about here? When people come up here crying, have they been affected? Or is that just, they haven't been affected? Are we only talking about if we affect their property? It only matters if we affect their streets and their cars and their houses. It doesn't matter if we affect their mental health. It doesn't matter. So to me, it's an absolutely artificial idea about affecting the population. The second point is that if the community wants to discuss it, this is the public square. This is where we discuss it. Part of the problem with the Gaza situation is that we refused to take it up. We refused as a council, and when we did, we were unable to control the situation simply from ineptitude, really. So when you talk about time having been wasted, had we addressed it, it would have been dealt with way, way, way sooner. And by the way, Mayor Sticks was not the vote to put it on the agenda. There were only 2 votes taken to put it on the agenda. That was myself and Sousa Francina. She did vote for it, but she did not vote to put it on the agenda. Mm-hmm. We did not, excuse me, it takes 2. And so I have to say that was not the case. And when people come up here and say the wrong thing, I think we need to point it out. And as you know, I am probably, no one can say that I stick up for the mayor generally. So, and I think that this language is going to lead to nothing but confusion. We're going to be debating whether or not something affects the local population. We're going to be in semantic debates. It's going to end up wasting our time. I just see this, I see this as an outgrowth of one specific instance of what happened here, and it's reactive in my mind. It is a reaction to what happened on one particular topic, and to govern via reaction is just bad governance. Besides of which, at this point in time, we do not need to be tightening what is possible for the public to say and what they feel comfortable coming up and asking their elected representatives to consider. And as Starchild said, we are always free to say no. And do we have the right to legislate for future legislators to say, no, you cannot address this topic? I for all of those reasons, all of those seem wrong to me. And so I'm a hard no on this. And finally, with my last time, I also sort of repeat Ms. Ross' complaints. This is a full-blown resolution that this council was unaware was being drafted. I didn't know, showed up. You know, how much time did we put into having it drafted? What if it doesn't pass? When we look at our legal bills, there's got to be a better process by which we come up with these kinds of processes. These, you know, we have a full-blown resolution here. Now, maybe I missed the memo, but I didn't know this was coming. I didn't know it was going to be full-blown. I wasn't prepared for it. I know that things happen and they go up on the, the coming soon to your local council member document, because I can't think of what the real name is. So I'm
the working agenda.
Working agenda.
Working agenda. Thank you. I'm it's not being flippant. I just really couldn't find the name for it. So in that way, I feel like I have been disempowered. I feel like I've not been part of this conversation. I feel like I've been disrespected. And I feel like it's cost us money to do so. And for those reasons, I'm upset with this.
Thank you, Ms. Rule. Yes, Ms. Lane.
Well, I will, I'll follow up with Councilmember Rule, only I tend to not be as emphatic as she is, but I agree with her. I've thought a lot about this ordinance, and I think that one of the points that was raised tonight is that we've gotten to a place right now, politically, globally, where local issues are national issues, are international issues, and vice versa. Everything affects us on some level, and more than anything, this was already said, but if a group of constituents comes to me and they express a concern, I want to be able to at least bring that up as a potential agenda item. I am not in favor of division or divisive agenda topics, but I think that if we do pass this ordinance, then we are limiting future councils from being able to address things that might be very important for them. And yes, they can always change the ordinance or do away with it, but it just makes a statement that that I think is limiting to the potential of a future council. And then one other thing too, I'm going to add to that, and that is that that I do think that things could have been handled better, differently in the past, and if we wanted to add, as Renee mentioned, add to the protocols that we prioritize, I'd be happy with adding to the protocols that we prioritize issues that affect our local community, but I'm not comfortable with an ordinance that limits us or limits future councils in the in terms of what they can bring before.
Thank you. Yes.
So I want to correct what happened because what the mayor brought up at an earlier meeting, I don't remember what it was, but it was in our normal, progress of new business, and the mayor said, I'd like to propose an ordinance which limits our work to local issues. And I supported that. Verbally, everybody got to hear that. This is a first reading of an ordinance, so there's going to be a second reading. So there's going to be...
It's a resolution. Sorry to jump in there.
It's only a resolution?
It's presently drafted, yes.
Okay.
Council could revise it to an ordinance, but it's presently drafted as a resolution.
Okay. This isn't the first time that this idea has been floated at City Council, that we limit ourselves to these issues. James Vega talked to me about that when I first came on City Council 2 years ago. It was something that he supported. The way that I understood what we were going to approach is that we're not going to, make decisions as a city council that are going to go out into the universe and be gone. For us to address it, the concept behind this is that whatever it is that we're addressing, it's got to be focused on somebody in our boundaries. And Star Child mentioned the plight of MLK. I would be happy to have someone come up to the podium and talk about somebody like MLK, and I would be happy to support, his release from prison. But I don't think it's the role of our city council to communicate about a criminal justice system. There's decision makers who make those decisions, and we're not one of them. And that's what I'm trying. That's why I would support this, is because I think we should confine our issues to those areas of jurisdiction that we've been given under our system of government. Someone else mentioned immigration. I don't think that I would not object to someone coming in and talking to us about immigration. But I would want our involvement to be to look at what can we as a city legally do to potentially assist, make the plight of somebody who's facing immigration issues. But if we have no legal ability to impact that, then I don't think we should be addressing it. And I don't necessarily want to talk about theoretical issues, but Matt, can you see that there would be maybe little chunks of the law where we could impact? I guess we could give direction to our police department as to how we want them to, policy statements about how to address immigration issues. Would
the council can adopt it's oftentimes framed as a sanctuary city resolution. And a number of cities have done them, including ones with contract sheriffs, although it's somewhat more common with in-house police departments. But it can provide direction subject to various limits on in summary, it's not doing any voluntary cooperation with the federal immigration system. That kind of certainly could be adopted as a policy statement by the council at a future meeting.
Hold on, guys. Hold on. I believe that Sheriff Freihoff actually said something to that effect countywide already. I think that was in the Star Free Press.
So, I would fully support the city council addressing that issue if it was brought forward, if we had the ability to impact how the issue played out. But if we don't have the ability to impact the decision makers on that, then I don't think we should be doing it.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Mang, do
Can
you
I
have
ask
anything to it?
ask a clarifying question?
Sure. Yeah.
Are you speaking if this is happening in our city? Or are you speaking if we could affect something that was happening in a wider range than our city and or our sphere of interest? I'm confused about that. I didn't get it.
When I was talking about the example of immigration, I would talk about, I would not object to our discussing potentially giving some policy direction to our law enforcement about our policy that we wanted them to follow in terms of how they were going to enforce the law.
No, I got that part, but you had a statement after that I didn't understand, but that's fine. It's okay. You were speaking more generally about if we could affect the law, then it might be worth doing. I'm sorry, it doesn't really matter. I was just, I couldn't
thought he was
follow.
saying work on what we can legally affect, I think is what he was trying to say. So in other words, that would be like a
Right.
policy statement to our police.
A policy statement to our police.
Our police.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I think that's what you were saying.
But in contrast, we can't go to INS or ICE and say, please do this. That's a subject matter for like public comment and input to our federal legislators, and it's not something that we have the ability to control.
I would love to hear from Ms. Mang.
I have anything to say. I
Okay.
agree with what the lady.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with what Rachel and Leslie. I'm just concerned too, with my constituents, if they had issues or whatever, not being able to address them, because that's why I'm here, because of them. So if it's something where we lost it, and a goal is communication and all of that. So
No, I hear you. So maybe if I can reply, it seems to me that the issue that I'm thinking about, and I have been thinking about this for a long time, and I watched you guys go through it, is that there were many things in our city that I would argue were neglected in favor of things that were not directly related to things that were here. For example, how long it took to approve a commissioner ratification system. It took so long to fill the commissions. And I thought, in my opinion, a valid criticism was too much effort was spent on things that were not directly affecting what I think became an issue for us. So I do agree with one thing that I heard in the public comments, which is if I look at section 1, for example, A, that's on page 3.2 or 3.4 rather, I would want to think about when it says boundaries of the city of Ojai, I do think we do have a sphere of influence that is just beyond our borders, and they do look to us. I would also see in section 2, when we're talking about the notion of what effect is, I think it's clearly here, if the city does not have jurisdiction to regulate the issue and its application to city operations or city residents. I think it's trying to use a very narrow word of effect, because all of us could be affected by a national policy that it's upsetting. But I have to think, for me, what I was watching was we were missing important things happening in our city because we were working on other things that I would argue, when the argument gets made, well, what if someone's in jail? Do we want to work on this resolution to get them out of jail? Which we can't get them out of jail. We can make a resolution to make a public statement, but we're not getting them out of jail. But what's happening in the meantime is we have a divided public arguing about whether or not to work, that this person should be in jail or not. That to me is not what we should be doing, in my opinion. And when I look at our goals, if somebody were to say, I think we should talk about Martin Luther King somewhere else, I would say, which one of these strategic goals that we agreed on does this attach to? And if you want to say, well, we don't need a resolution because we have these goals, that's okay. But then what's the danger of having this? And as you pointed out, any council could move forward and do something different. And then just to say, we make ordinances not for ourselves. We make ordinances for some perpetuity that can always be changed. So to say we're hamstringing somebody, I think is false. But we're always making the regulations we do make are always thinking of the future. But I would just say, I want to focus on what we can literally do. I mean, it manifests into things. So that's my thinking on that. Yeah.
So I have one thing. So I've been thinking about examples, like what would this encompass? And let's take war or some kind of global conflict. You know, if that war comes to the U.S. and hits L.A. is a target. We are so close to L.A. that having an ordinance or having even just a letter to our representatives from the city, we would have to talk about that in a meeting. And so there are, I think that having this ordinance would limit us from addressing some of those concerns that could potentially impact our community in a very real way. Or if, let's say, right now, many of us are on agency boards, federal funding is getting cut for things like buses. People are losing their jobs. There are very real things that are happening on a national level that are impacting us. And we don't know how they're going to impact us yet, because bus lines might get cut. I mean, these are things that we're talking about in our agencies, and they're real. Bus lines might get cut. We might not have the funding that's been promised to us through grants for attending to some of these things. Having the ability to at least write a letter or send the mayor and the city manager and the attorney to DC to do some lobbying or some speaking with representatives, I think that's going to be more and more important. And so I'm looking at this not just in terms of what happened in the past, but what could potentially happen in the future.
Can I ask you about your example?
Yeah.
So if the state from the federal government said buses are going to be cut and Ventura County is going to be affected, and you wanted to bring it to the council, and then we think about as a council, what can we do? We can increase our trolley line, we can do these different various things, or we can also work with our county. To me, that completely works here. If you say we should spend money sending our attorney and city manager to Washington, D.C., I would say that seems like not something that's my own opinion, a good use of our money.
And I would say back that cities like Thousand Oaks are sending members to DC or sending members to the Sacramento. I serve on a policy committee. I'm going and talking to members of other communities who are actually doing some active lobbying. And I'm not saying that that's what I want us to do. And I'm not saying, I'm not advocating for it. But, if we have an issue like SpaceX, for example, which does affect us, and we want to do anything to partner with others in the community, other cities in the community, then we are going to need to look at policies that involve a bigger picture than just our streets and our trees, because SpaceX is affecting our trees and our houses and our streets.
That's a good example, though. It seems to me that the SpaceX is a great example because we are feeling the sonic booms.
Yeah.
But,
Can I make a
but that's the
comment?
I'll come right to you. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Well, I was going to use another example. The Santa Susana toxic site that is 20 miles as the crow flies from us, but not directly affecting us. Yet I went and spoke in front of the Ventura County supervisors, speaking to the fact mostly as support for the children that are the result of cancer, etc. But a very good point was made, was that we're 20 miles. We're one good gust of wind from that being us. Do I now have to come to the council and get permission to do that, to represent the city? Okay, that's a good question. How much time are we going to spend on that? Also, I was lobbied by a lot of people, local, my constituents, to please go down there and make that statement. It was in fact, at the farmer's market where I was stopped and asked to go make that statement. So it's those kinds of things. I think it's very, very clear that there are no boundaries and borders any longer.
If this said county, would that make you feel better?
Not really, because I think it's a principle thing. And so I'm just trying to bring home the fact that, right now it doesn't say that, but
if it did, because the Santa Susana side, if they're asking, we want all the cities in the county to speak on the subject, that's a direct effect. But if you said, we're very concerned about what's happening in West Africa right now, would you bring something to the council and we're going to spend time deliberating about what's happening in West Africa? I would want to offer, let's get everything done on our checklist first. That's what I would say.
You could argue that.
Yeah.
And it would be up to the council to decide if they wanted to follow that. It's really the lack of choice.
I hear you.
You want to make a point that, we shouldn't be involving ourselves in that. And I want to make a point that we are.
Okay.
And I want to have that conversation. I don't want not to have that conversation. And I want the council, who are the elected representatives representing their people, 25% of Ojai, right? We are the voice. It's as we've talked about, it's a representative government. I don't want someone to say to my constituents, sorry, the council decided that I can't actually bring that up for discussion.
No, I hear what you're
really
saying.
Wish I could.
I get you.
I know you do, but it to me, I don't know how we get. But okay, thank you. I know you hear. I know you hear that. And once again, what affects people is deep and it's broad and it's important, and it isn't about roads and all of this infrastructure stuff.
I totally hear
and
what
I've
you're
said
saying.
that, so
And
I'm going to let that go.
I hear that. My response would be, I'm trying to represent what I heard too. Of course, we're all trying to do that. But I would also say, we're not taking polls every time we vote. We're also working with our conscience, of course, and our data. And it seems to me, if someone came to me and said, I want you guys to curtail NASA funding because I think we're spending too much on space exploration, I would say, let me get through our Ojai checklist first, is what I would say. And that's okay. We have a differing opinion about that, and that's totally fine.
But that's not what we're talking about here. That isn't what happened. No, that isn't the result.
Okay.
That isn't how this ordinance came about. When someone came to you about, North Africa. It was local people saying, I want this issue to be dealt with.
No, I'm sorry. But what people came to me to say is...
Well, you weren't on the council at the time.
Oh, no, I hear you. I'm saying what I heard over this past year and a half was, please, please, please do. In fact, this is one of the strongest things that came forward for me. So I knew it was something that I was going to bring forward was, please change this. And so and if it doesn't happen, that's okay. It's totally fine. But maybe what I would do is, I want to suggest we could just keep talking all night and we don't have to persuade each other, but let's take a comment or two.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of comments.
Yep.
Because listening to Rachel, having a concern about bus lines in Ventura County, and even if Ojai hasn't been targeted yet, I would still believe that we'd have the ability to take up the cut in funding that would potentially supplies our bus lines. And, so I would see that as an issue of impacting our community. And then you raised another example. I'm drawing a blank. What was SpaceX? I mean, SpaceX, we're feeling that. There's no question in my mind. In fact, I support this resolution. I also support that we do, we figure out what we can do in response to SpaceX, and we absolutely object to what's going on. And then as to Councilmember Rule, wanting to be able to go, talk to the County Board of Supervisors about a toxic spill. So first of all, there's nothing that prevents one of us from going to any meeting, anywhere, even in East Africa. But if we're going to announce that I'm a city council member and you don't have the authority of the rest of the city council to speak, then you have to say, I'm speaking as an individual. And you can absolutely do that. And, I've seen examples of that, right here in our community where someone will say, I'm on this board, but I'm speaking as an individual. And so, but if you wanted the endorsement of the city council for that speech or presentation, then I gotta believe that if there's some serious toxic thing happening within 20 miles of us, that we're all gonna think, well, maybe we don't have any evidence that it's here in our community right now, but how far away from it is it, and how long is it gonna be before it gets here? And we can discuss that.
But if we have a resolution that says that we can't, then we need to deal with that. And that is what this resolution says.
Well, I'm happy to extend the boundary if that makes it easier, but you said it's principle, not really boundary.
It's principle. And then, maybe it's more, maybe it's, I'm on the Southern California Council of Governments. Maybe it's Southern California. But my main principle is I was duly elected to represent my constituents who knock on my door and tell me their concerns, and I do not feel comfortable telling them what their elected representative has the power or willingness to do. So that's the main point. The other points are just, they're logistical problems, they're definitional problems, and they exist, and they will come up for conversation. But that's the main point. Anyway.
Well, I had somebody approach me and they asked me, could I help make Ojai an anti-sanctuary city? And I said, I'm not willing to do that. So I feel comfortable saying that's not something I can support.
Yeah, but if I feel like I should support it, but I can't.
Well, that's different.
That is different, and that is what I'm speaking about.
But it's not only your constituents say it, right? You're also using your conscience.
I'm not sure the relevance of that.
Oh, You're not only representing your constituents.
No. I mean, it's a balancing act. Yes, of course it is. If someone comes up to me and my constituents want me to be racist or whatever, I can say, that doesn't fit with my values.
Yeah.
There might be somebody else, but I'm talking about constituents that come up to me
that you agree with.
Not even that I agree with, that I don't actively disagree with, that
Fair
I
enough.
believe it should be part of the public squares conversation.
No, fair enough.
That's really what it's about.
I totally hear you. And I would just maybe one last thing, and then I'm happy to stop. The public square conversation is that this is not the only public square. So there's many places people talk about many, many things. So my interest is we talk about the things that we can influence. But you already said it, but we're not going to convince each other.
No, can I just say one thing though? This is the only official public square where it is on record. That's
totally okay.
Very, very important that people can search on it. Public squares in other places are unofficial and there's no record of it.
Fair enough.
And that's the difference for me.
Okay. Understood. Anything else?
And I guess just on the last comment, I mean, we will continue to receive comments from the public, and all this would potentially do is if that comment is not on a topic that we have any jurisdiction legally, then we wouldn't take it further and make it a discussion amongst the five of us on that issue, because we just don't have any legal ability to impact that issue.
That's it.
That's what I understood the intent of the.
That is my intent. Do you have anything you want to add before we vote?
No, thanks for that clarification, because that.
People could talk about whatever they want.
Yeah, so it's not shutting. If your constituents had an issue, you could come and speak at a council meeting, and we'll talk about it.
No, we won't talk about it.
Mr. Whitman's saying we wouldn't take it up if we couldn't affect it.
So we shouldn't take up anything.
There would have to be a threshold, decision about whether we have any legal ability to impact it.
No, but
that is not what we talk about all the time. Whether or not we have a legal ability to affect it.
So I guess what I'm saying, I feel like we're at the stage now where we're trying to persuade each other. But I would suggest let's call for a vote.
Well, I mean, I'm going to make a motion that to Councilmember Lang's point and also to Ms. Ross' point, that we make this something that goes into a protocols document as opposed to ordinance. So
what would be the meaningful difference there, Mr. Summers?
The meaningful difference is between resolution and ordinance, because the resolution is adoptable by 3 votes, amendable at will on any agenda. An ordinance can only be adopted, but for urgency ordinances, with 2 votes at 2 meetings and the second vote at a regular meeting.
But she was saying protocols versus
document.
Protocols versus the protocols is adopted by resolution right now, so that is legally they're the same thing.
Okay.
The difference operationally is that we tend to amend the protocols less often. And in the past, when we've amended the protocols, it's often brought up several other issues. So, but legally, because the protocols is adopted by resolution, there's no legal difference between this reso or any other reso and the protocols.
So you're saying that it is easier to discuss something that is a resolution versus something that is a protocol in the protocols. Is that what you're saying? That the protocols is actually a more stringent
I heard you say it's the same thing.
No, legally they're the same. The protocols is adopted by resolution. Operationally, we've made it more difficult to amend it because the council has tended not to want to amend the protocols, but legally they're the same thing.
Right. So, but operationally, it's more difficult, is what you're saying. Protocols is more
yes.
difficult than a resolution.
Cool.
Correct, because the protocols has been treated as for lack of a better word, an elevated resolution, but legally they're the same. It's just adopted by resolution.
So let me ask you something. If I've heard you say that, protocols can be overridden by 3 votes of the council in real time. Right. I mean, we've said that, well, we can vote on it here and now, and we can override the protocols document. Can you do that with a resolution, or does that require a second reading?
A resolution can be adjusted at will as long as it's on the agenda.
And it doesn't take 30 days to go into effect?
No, that's an ordinance.
Okay. Still 100% against it.
Well, and if I was going to make a motion, actually, and you may not agree with this, but I do think that some of the comments did give me a pause, and I was thinking about this. Section 1, that directly impact the health, safety, and welfare of residents and visitors, the boundaries of the city of Ojai. I did think that Mr. Miley's comment, which is one that I also had thought about, the community of Ojai, it seems, so I'm looking at now section 1B, the city council shall direct its policies towards matters, et cetera, and other concerns that are the concerns and directly impact the Ojai community. I personally would like to extend that to our sphere of influence. I think that answers some of those technical difficulties that people would have, that someone lives right outside the city limits and it's still going to affect them more or less the same way. No, I'm proposing that as an amendment, that the Ojai community.
Well, I think that's why it says Ojai community instead of city of Ojai, but I'm all in favor of being more clear.
Yeah, but if section A said, and the environment within the Ojai community in section A, if we replace that, then it's consistent.
Oh, okay. So you're saying within the strike boundaries of the city of Ojai and replace it with the Ojai community or the Ojai sphere of influence.
Yeah.
And then where did you say you could put Ventura County, so it just gives us a little more?
Well, I was simply trying to respond to Ms. Rule's point, but if it said, for example, I'm looking at section 1A, if it said, and the environment within the Ojai community or the county of Ventura, I would be totally fine with that personally.
Well, I would think that's better.
Yeah.
It's a little bit better.
I'm fine with that.
Okay, well, that's what I would suggest. If I could, what I'd say is, if I look at section 1A, if the language read at the end of that sentence, and the environment within the Ojai community and county of Ventura, and then we don't have to nitpick every single piece, but you guys could then take that and follow suit. Would that be acceptable, Mr. Summers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Adopted.
That's the principle. Then I would suggest that.
Can I?
Yeah. Let's hear it.
Can I make just a question?
Yes.
That might be a friendly amendment.
Yeah.
If in section 1, this says shall prioritize instead of only consider, then that opens up a little bit of breathing room for, so it says, yes, we want to prioritize these things, but there's a little bit of breathing room for any future council that might have an issue.
If that builds our consensus, I will do it.
I would vote.
That would build my
Yes.
consensus.
Yes.
Okay.
That would build my consensus.
Deal.
Great.
So
Yes.
where is that going in?
Okay, so section 1A, tell me if I get it wrong. In its deliberations, the city council shall prioritize policies, resolutions, ordinances, and actions policies that directly impact the health, safety, welfare of residents and visitors, infrastructure, economy, and the environment within the boundaries of the Ojai community and county of Ventura.
Yeah.
I realize it got bigger and it got like a tiny bit squishier, but I can live with that.
I should have thought about that at the very beginning.
I just have one quick
Yeah.
question. So would this affect people that wanted to rent like Libby Bowl or have their thing, they wouldn't be able to?
No, they could do that. You're
No,
saying like if
that's
somebody
governed
wanted to have a,
Because I had constituents
Oh,
in
tell
the
me what-
past, like when they went and somebody got their permits to have an outdoor function at Libby Bowl, and it was drums banging, and I think it was for the Gaza or something like that, and it was.
well, we don't decide what goes in there.
So yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
Libby Bowl's under a separate contract for management.
well, not only that, but there's that's a totally separate matter because individuals
so it
have a right
doesn't-
to freedom of speech, and unless there's going to be an imminent threat to the public safety, we in general try to allow those types of things because we're supposed to do that.
Yeah, and I don't.
Totally separate from this.
So that would be a question of us excluding anyone. And we don't do that. That would be excluding someone who wasn't.
But my point, I'm sorry to jump in here, is that is not.
No, I get it.
That's completely separate and distinct from
Yeah.
this, and not
Okay,
there's no bleed on this whatsoever.
Yeah, got it.
So, Mr. Montgomery, do you have it as I stated it? Do you need me to say it again?
Mayor, the motion's clear for section 1A. I would ask you, you had some changes to section 1B.
Well,
Are those part of your motion?
I'm asking the principles of section 1A that would carry out throughout the document, which Mr. Summers will handle.
And changes throughout, shifting City of Ojai to Ventura County and shall only consider to shall prioritize. Change throughout.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Well, I made the motion, but I need a second.
I'll second it.
Oh, great. Okay, ready?
Roll call.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lang.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Councilmember Mang.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
Mayor Gilman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Good enough. Good enough's good enough.
Long haul, but we got it done.
Thanks, guys. No, it's good.
Yeah,
We've
thank you.
talked and
That
worked.
was good.
That was good.
It was good.
Nice.
Teamwork.
Cool.
Legislative compromise and action.
All right. These next two, I think, are going to be fast.
We would love it if these were very fast. These are.
Let's burn through 4 and 5.
Okay, great. Your public works director is here. This can be a very, very brief staff report.
Wonderful.
Very, very brief questions. Very, very brief public comment. Thank
Yay.
you.
Good evening, all. So I have two ordinances to introduce, two ordinances today, not a resolution. Both of them are very routine. The first one is the introduction of a new ordinance. The second one is a revision to an old. But I'll start with the first one. And this is a very common and routine ordinance that many agencies have. And it is a moratorium on roadway pavement cuts. So what this really is, I will break it down and put in an essence. It is a moratorium on our newly paved streets. So what we are trying to do is preserve the condition that, since we are investing so much money and so many resources in paving our roads, that we are trying to preserve the new condition of them as long as possible. So what this means is that, so if it's an asphalt project, meaning new asphalt, we have a 5-year moratorium on pavement cuts in the street. And if it's a slurry seal, which is a seal, we have a 3-year moratorium. There are exceptions to this, and we will be allowing the exceptions. It is up to my discretion to approve cuts, and clearly emergencies, planned work. In the ordinance, it specifies exactly what those exceptions are. We don't intend on stopping agencies from doing the work they need to do. It's really to discourage pavement cuts, if you will. And if we do allow the exceptions, we have a broader trenching requirement for them. For example, it's not just the trench where their water main is. For example, if it's Casitas, they go to the center line of the street that has been newly paved and pave that area. So the city is investing so much money on paving and infrastructure that this is something that needs to happen. Most agencies have it. We will keep a list up on our website of the streets and the year of the moratorium, and they will come to us for an exception or come to us for an encroachment permit still. In addition, we have implemented quarterly utility meetings with all of our agencies, our local agencies, including Southern California Edison. So Sanitary District, Water District, Ventura River, and Casitas, and everybody else, anybody else who is excavating into our roadways. So we are going to roll this out to them, and it's important that we get an ordinance like this adopted. We've got another paving project that is underway right now. We've got another one just back to back after that. So we've got the ATP project. We've got our paving project we've done last year. So we don't have this ordinance on the books, which surprised me when I came here because it's very usual. It's very common. So that's about as brief as I can be.
That's great. Let's do 4 and 5 separately. So I know.
Of course.
Yeah, no,
yes.
cool.
Oh, naturally. Yes.
And any questions for Ms. Bulmer? Yeah.
So, are we emulating some other jurisdictions? So we're not like creating new ground. This is somebody else has done it, and
every agency I've worked for has had a pavement moratorium. This city was unique. Ironically, we have kept a list of streets that have been recently paved and posted them on our website and told these utility companies that we had a moratorium, but we don't. So we need this to enforce it. So there it is.
And I'll add that this is drafted from a number of other jurisdictions. It's standard language.
It's very common.
Anything else?
You know, I'm curious about the waiver program, but I kind of read into it that it's so we'll give somebody a waiver from the moratorium if they meet some criteria, which is basically looks like they didn't. You know, the fact that they didn't already do their curb cut is, you know, if it's their fault, then they're not gonna get a waiver. But if
so part of this is it's basically, I mean, it's if you go to page 4 of the ordinance, it's very, very clear, and it's endanger life, property, public health, and safety. Interruption. If Casitas has a water main break that breaks, we're going to allow them to go in and fix it. The other thing that we may see is we may see a catch up, because what has happened is a lot of the agencies, I know Casitas and I know Ojai Valley Sanitary District, they, like us, put together their CIP, which is a multi-year document. So we want to get this approved so they can start planning around these streets. We are coordinating these streets with them, so if they have any infrastructure improvements, they can plan around our moratorium.
Let me jump in here. So the other thing that we're doing, which is it's a best practice everywhere else, and Ms. Palmer and I have talked about this. We didn't have this on the books, which is crazy. Well, the other thing we're doing now is quarterly utility meetings, so that we talk to everybody about their projects, and so we can all jump in the same trench together. However, I will tell you that invariably what happens, you pave a street and there is a water break, or somebody has a service disruption where they, increasingly utilities are underground and we have to dig them up. So it doesn't stop things entirely. It's going to still happen, just makes it so it happens less often.
it makes it also a little bit more intentional for the agencies, really. It's like, we put these streets out there, we have a map out there, these are the streets that we are paving, and there will be a moratorium. And they can plan their improvements accordingly.
It also allows us to push back on the utilities, on the necessity for them to do the work. We really get to press them on, like, okay, can you really, do you have to do this right now? Can this wait? Is it, et cetera, et cetera.
So if you're in that 5-year period, and there is a break, so they've got to do the trench, that provision you mentioned where they've got to pave from the center line so that we've got a
Yes.
cohesive pavement.
Yes.
That goes into effect.
Yes. We have our standard plates, standard requirements for trenching on streets that aren't under moratorium. And then we've got this expanded requirement if they are trenching in streets that are under moratorium. Larger trenching, smoother, to the center line, et cetera.
Right.
So.
Ms. Palmer, I just want you to know I have the road paving map on my phone. So when people ask me when is this happening, I show them the map. Okay? All right.
I just printed that, laminated it. All of our public works crew has it now in their trucks. So it's all good.
Mr. Montgomery, I have no cards, but is there anybody online?
Only 2, so let's extend this. We are taking public comment, Zoom participants on item 4. I don't expect any raised hands, Mayor. And we'll move on.
Thank you. Any more discussion?
I'll make a motion.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the proposed moratorium on roadway pavement cuts.
I'll second that. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
Councilmember Mang.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Gilman.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All
Okay,
right.
maybe I can be more brief on this one. Since
You were
this is
you were
just an
great.
amendment to our
You were awesome.
So the second ordinance is an amendment to our, an ordinance that the city council adopted in 2014. And this refers to the limits of the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act. And what this means to us in Public Works and citywide is we can contract, without going out to bid, under a certain threshold, 75,000. So the state controller's office has the opportunity every 5 years to increase these monetary limits. That's all this is they are increasing the limits. They have increased the limits as of January of this year. So we are amending our code to stay in line with what the state allows us to do. That's what this is in a nutshell.
That seemed clear to me.
Okay.
Any questions? Any public comment, Mr. Montgomery?
And just
Oh,
real
yes,
quickly,
go.
so we will not be coming back to council in 5 years when this increases because we have embedded that language in this ordinance to automatically do it.
Did you have any questions? Okay.
No, Mayor. No raised hands.
Wonderful.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second
Okay.
that we approve
Yes, that we approve the ordinance.
as proposed. Wonderful. Okay.
Roll call. Councilmember Mang.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lang.
Yes.
Mayor Gilman.
Yes.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Councilmember Rule.
Yes.
Hey,
Thank you, Ms.
all.
Palmer.
Second reading, 2 weeks, or first meeting in March, effective 30 days after.
I just
Thank
have
you.
one quick question on number 4 that we just approved. Matt, I don't know,
Yep.
prepared by Tim.
Tim Crow.
Tim Crow. He's
So
one of my associates
he is-
who specializes in public works issues.
Okay, perfect.
So he wrote this draft for this city and a half dozen others.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Second reading will be consent, right?
Yes.
Yeah, second reading's
Yeah,
typically on
yeah,
consent.
Just consent. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
See you.
Any council member reports? I know, just quick, man, quick. Any council member reports? Okay. Yes, no?
No.
City managers report?
None.
And our future agenda items, I'm assuming we will postpone. There'll be tactics. We're going to come back and they'll be part of our strategy. Unless somebody wants to bring up something. Okay.
Nope.
Then the meeting is adjourned.
All right.